Sword of Coming Chapter 902. After Yi Yunyun took the lead to leave, Sui didn't say a word on the right. She immediately went down the mountain with her sword and went to Luobao Beach on the banks of the Tsingyi River by herself. Qiu Du took the girl, Hu Chuling, to travel along the ridge road to Zhangxianfang. Between Luopa Mountain and Pushun, the two masters asked the punches, which opened the eyes of the old woman. The key is the dissatisfaction of the person who wins the boxing, and the lack of discouragement of the loser, which makes the old woman feel especially valuable. After the dangerous circumstances surrounding the Dragon Palace in Dadu, and then witnessing Chen Pingan's style with her own eyes, the old woman had a good impression of the Xiandu mountain. The high mountains rise and stop. Not to mention that the green shirt in that one is still a sword fairy. The old woman looked into the distance, feeling a little for no reason. How can the mountains and rivers allow people to paint? The earth and the heaven are still separated. The old woman said in her heart, "Vinegar, Master will try to help you find a genealogy status in Xiandu Mountain, but this matter may not be successful." Hu Chuling nodded, without asking why Master changed his mind temporarily. The old woman hesitated for a moment and reminded, "Vinegar, if you really become the ancestor of the ancestor here, don't be willful in the future. I believe you have already seen that the young Chen Jianxian, although he is a very good person, look at that girl Pei, the martial arts level is so high, on her master's side, she is still so disciplined and courteous. Cui Xianshi is about to become the lord of the sect. By her husband, she is not the same as respectful." But what the old woman truly feels assured and trusting in Xiandu Mountain is not even these so-called sword immortals, sect masters, and Jijing, but the kind of smile from the heart. Chen Pingan treats everyone, and everyone treats Chen Pingan. Like the two children whose names and identities are not yet known by Qiu Du, they seem to be full of unreasonable respect, dependence and closeness towards Chen Jianxian. This is actually a very strange thing. In the Haoran sect, there are young monks who have a lot of generations and realms from the old people. Many people have seen Zhongli and worshipped in the Patriarch Hall on the road. They may not even greet them. Dare to fight, be cautious, be in awe, and be restrained, let alone meet a patriarch who founded a sect. Hu Chuling had a pair of watery eyes, his smile turned into a crescent moon, and his voice was soft and glutinous. "I listened to Grandma." On Kyuta's side, the girl still likes to call her master Grandma in the dialect of her hometown. The old woman touched the girl's head. "I don't know who will be blessed in the future to marry us in jealousy as a wife." "Well, that young graduate named Xiao Sunny looks very good. Also, Xiao Sunny is still Chen Jiangxian's proud disciple." The old woman glanced at her jealously. It would be better if the two of them could be beautiful and happy. Shenxian family couple, old age together, full of descendants. The old woman laughed to herself. Sweeping the flower platform, Cui Dongshan and the two children reminded, "Today's Tu Kongquan, you two remember to keep it secret and don't say a word to the outside world." Qing Chaolu nodded and agreed. As for why, Fei Naozi thought about what those some didn't do, and if he had that free time, he could practice more punches and make another table of meals. Yu Xianhui is a person who likes to dig into the roots, and wonders, it's a good thing, what's so shameful? If this is the hometown, Lao Tzu will ask who the sword has won with his true ability, and it will be awkward to beat the gongs and drums, and the wine table brags and farts. Cui Dongshan frowned, a snow-white sleeve leaned back over his shoulder. "Huh." Yu Xianhui immediately sighed, "Listen to sect master Cui. Last time, 9 of them were acquired by this big white goose with the supernatural powers in their sleeves. Except for King Sun Chun, the others were full of suffering, especially by Xian, who is not afraid of heaven and earth. Now I see Cui Dongshan. It's almost like seeing a ghost." Yu Xianhui also remembers it fresh. "It's okay, when I asked Jian Jian to beat Cui Wei, the next one is you, the big white goose." Chui Dongshan grinned. He put his arms around the slanted neck abruptly, his head knocked, and then lowered his voice. In the future, I want to ask the sword to beat your master Chui Zhonglu. It is not easy. I still want to ask. Sword me, the next sect master. I am so courageous, ambitious, admire. Why, your kid is now ambitious and wants to usurp me as the sect master one day. Who borrows your bear heart and leopard courage? Quickly speak out and listen. Yes, body became stiff when he slanted back, immediately looked at Chen Pingan, and yelled, Sect Master Chui, if you are so innocent, I'm going to sue the hermit. Chen Pingan turned his head and smiled. Since our next sect is the sect of Kendo and you are also a sword repairer, wanting to ask the seniors like Sect Master Chui about the sword is the meaning of the question in this mountain, and it happens to be you practicing the sword. Is there anything you dare? I can put my words here now. In the future, whether you win your master or Chui sect master, I will invite you to drink. You slanted back and immediately felt confident. Even if he was still strangled by the big white goose, he began to laugh. Hi, my lord, then I have to practice drinking right now. I heard that the small wine shop in my hometown has countless wine bureaus, but Master Ingguan has never been drunk. Of course, the second shopkeeper has never lost money. Chen Pingan quipped, actually, I drink moderately. It's just that the drunkards in the shop have too much alcohol, so I rely on my peers. Qing Chaolu feels a little regretful. If Nalan Yubi is here, she must have recorded this golden and jade good saying in the book again. Chui Dongshan Yufeng left the flower sweeping table, and there were a lot of tedious tasks waiting for him to solve. On the way to Yufeng, she secretly glanced at Huang Yiyun and Xue Fuzi who were walking towards Mishue Peak. Found the white cloud, Yi Yunyun raised her head and waved to Chui Dongshan. Chui Dongshan is amazed, and he deserves to be an end martial artist who has just reached the first level of Guasian. Furthermore, Yi Yunyun's disposition is indeed related to her own Shindu mountain, majestic. After hesitating for a while, Chui Dongshan made up his mind and planned to meet Huang Yiyun alone for a while. The wind rushed, his snow-white figure drew an arc in the air, settled on the blue stone road between the blue cliffs, and when he came to Huang Yiyun, he smiled. Congratulations to the master of Yeshan's martial arts. Yi Yunyun had already stopped, holding her fists in return, and frankly said, thanks to the help of Lord Qin Shan, otherwise, if I ask Wu Tan about the boxing in the future, I will have a big problem. If I am not careful, I will have to settle down with the king of Luzhou. Nearly the end. Chui Dongshan sighed, and stopped talking. Yi Yunyun smiled and said, Sect Master Chui has something to say, he is not an outsider anyway. Chui Dongshan said, it is true that after returning from the barren world, my husband was injured not lightly. He only talked about martial arts, and he fell from Guasian to energetic, otherwise he would not be able to negotiate with the old of Qinghu Palace. Lu Yuawan happened not long ago. Yi Yunyun's heart was shaken. When Chen Ping'an asked about a boxing with herself, she was only a little more energetic. She immediately turned her head and looked at Xue Huai, the last 2 furnaces of Yuhua pills given to us by Qinghu Palace, how many are left? Yu Feijin believes in Tanzhong law, no matter how many more are there, bring them anyway. Xue Huai was even more surprised than Yi Yunyun. The old master couldn't hide his stunned look. The fall of a pure martial artist was not a trivial matter. It was rarer and more troublesome than the fall of a chi trainer. But even so, Chen Shanju agreed to be with the master. Qin Quan of the game. Chen Shanju is indeed an upright gentleman, acting generously and upright, and a man of glory. It's no wonder that the young Chen Shanju was able to serve as the last hermit in the Great Wall of Jinchi, as a sword repairman in a foreign country. I believe that with Qin Shan's character, the Great Wall of Jinchi will surely be well received and praised. I have to admit that now Pushun owes Xiandu mountain of favor from heaven, but such a debt of favor, is it not a kind of great deeds that cannot be met? Just a scan of the flower table and questioning boxing helped Master to reach the first level of return to the real. You see, Pu Shan Yun Chao Tang has a deeper foundation, and Yu Gong, for the entire Tongis Hao, can also shock those monks from other continents who have misbehaving. Even if Wuxing Wu Tan is not in his hometown, as long as the master has a solid state, he is a great sword immortal like Su Hao, who is extremely jealous and dare not ask the master about the sword easily. Cui Dongshan hurriedly waved his hand. It was not because of this that I complained to Yishan. There is old Lu sitting in Qingjing Mountain, and my husband's Yu Hua Wan is indispensable. The reason why I nag about this is just like what Yishan said, we are all our own family, there is no need to hide and tuck. Fortunately, Huang Yiyun is already a cultivator of the Yupu realm. If she is still Yuaning Dixian, Tusk, if she wants to break the bottleneck and enter the 5 realms, she needs to face the demons. The consequences are unthinkable, and it is estimated that her husband will have to add a little more. It's a dull love debt. Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves, stretched out his hand and scratched his face, and asked in a low voice, Master Yishan, can I ask you for the identity of the progeny of Pushun Yunkatang? But this matter, regarding my true identity, Pushun has at most 3 people. Know that you, Shui Huai, Palms Tan Rong. No problem. Yi Yunyun said quickly, and nodded without hesitation. She knew that it was the trouble involved in Pushun's 7th fairy picture. The 3 of them walked towards Mishue Peak together. During the period they needed to pass by Zushan Qingping Peak, Yi Yunyun looked a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a long time, he tentatively said, Sect Master Cui, can you take the liberty to ask, your husband, who is he? How to practice boxing? Cui Dongshan embraced the back of his head with his hands, and slowly said, in my hometown in a foreign country, on a long journey on the way home, in the mountains and outside the mountains, in the hearts of the people in the world, in the beautiful scenery of the mountains and rivers, in the sun and the moon, in the beauty of the world. In the mud of the world, where swordsmanship is like a cloud, after hope, disappointment and hope again, the husband is practicing boxing alone, asking questions about the world, and asking himself about the boxing. Turning his head, the white-clothed boy finally smiled and said, so my husband never regards Chao Ci as a great enemy, a mortal enemy, or an old enemy. There is Chao Ci in the world. There is a pure Chao Ci in front of the martial arts road. A kind of great fortune, so it will only make Mr. climb higher and faster. Yi Yunyun heard the words, her mood was agitated, and her thoughts flew over. After a moment of silence, she couldn't help asking, there is a Fengzhong Tudi newspaper, and it says that Chen Pingon asked for a punch at Gonglin and Chao Ci. Isn't the punch special? From start to finish, punches and punches. Cui Dongshan turned his head and sighed fiercely, fart, what a thief, dare to slander my husband with a conscience, it's so wicked. Yi Yunyun will be suspicious. Chen Pingon was at the flower-sweeping platform and asked Pei Qian to imitate Yi Yunyun and Shui Huai to make punches. He had more than 60 piles of punches, and Pei Qian had already practiced like a 7 to 8. Even Yi Yunyun and Shui Huai's tricks to suppress the killer skills at the bottom of the box, Pei Qian also learned a lot, full of spirit, and passed on more than Pushun's diary. This put Chen Pingon, who had originally planned to put on the air of the master and help his disciples check and fill in the vacancies, into an embarrassing situation with nothing to say. Qing Chaolu thinks that Sister Pei's punching is of course very beautiful, but it seems that the hermit is still punching with others, which is better. Yu Xianhui felt that it was a pity that Bai Xian was not present today. Pei Qian stopped his figure and turned to look at the master. Chen Pingon smiled and said, not bad. Bringing Pei Qian to Qingping Peak, Chen Pingon smiled and asked, what did you want to say before? Pei Qian said, I discussed with Xue Fuzi, the last punch. Xue Fuzi shouldn't stand still, as if waiting to be killed. As a pure martial artist, I think this is wrong. In fact, when the punch was over, what I want to say is that I just feel that Xue Fuzi is an elder and there are too many outsiders present, so I am not ashamed to speak. Chen Pingan smiled and said nothing. Pei Qian felt that most of the words were wrong. This is a very good reason, so I should talk to Fuzi Xue. Chen Pingan nodded and said, but it's not necessarily what you said at that moment, so your hesitation, and ultimately your failure to say it, is appropriate. From Master's point of view, it may be more correct than the truth itself. Pei Qian was so surprised that he showed a somewhat ashamed look that is not common nowadays. From Xiao He Tan back then to Pei Qian today, I have always believed in one thing. The good truths in the world are all on Master's side. As for herself, she knows the truth of a fart. Chen Pingan laughed softly. We reason with others, not to deny others. In addition, to give others goodwill, in addition to our own clear conscience, we also need to pay attention to a sense of proportion. This is the difference between Taoism, the only way, but the way. There are thousands of them, which vary from person to person and from place to place, so it's hard to be a good person. Reached out his hand and patted Pei Qian's head lightly. Chen Pingan had a gentle expression and said softly, if you can think about it today, Master can safely teach you 2 homemade punches and a certain half punch. In fact, Chen Ping's 2 punches created by him are both a boxing technique and a sword move. One is simple and the other is complex, which is like 2 extremes. One of the punches, or swordsmanship, is named Pianyue. It is powerful and kills. The strength is not low, and it is most suitable for violently in the battlefield. Chen Pingan added, but it's not a hurry. I will go back to Shaodong and retreat within a day. When the ceremony is over, I will find some free time to teach boxing. Now and the disciple are both at a level of enthusiasm, and Chen Pingan is really a bit embarrassed about feeding Pei Qian. Pei Qian felt relieved. Chen Pingan was in a peaceful mood and glanced at the scene outside the mountain. The mountains are endless, and the clouds and water are indisputable. The reason why Chao Qingqing didn't show up at the flower-sweeping platform to watch the battle today is because the next sovereign of the internal decision, as a monk in the Dragon Gate realm, has begun to officially retreat and settle the Golden Core. Study and practice do not delay. Such a proud disciple, you can't find it even when you play the lantern. However, Chao Sunny's current retreat is not on Qingping Peak or Mishue Peak in Xiandu Mountain, but on a new mountain that has not been seen until now. Cui Dongshan used the array method to show his blind eye. Even Yi Yunyun neither Chiu Du could see through the truth. The other 2 old mountains, Cui Dongshan, were named Yunzhengshan and Sumiaishan. The main peaks of are Wuchao Peak and Jingxing Peak. 2 monuments were erected on the tops of the 2 mountains. Cui Dongshan personally seal-carved, Wu Chao cannot go out, and Heaven and Earth Purple Qi. Cui Dongshan will discuss matters in the Patriarch's Hall in the first session, and raise an issue in public, and among the younger generation of monks who will be included in the next genealogy in the future, the first sword repairman who is among the monks of the Yupu realm can enter the master of my Chao Feng. And Chao Qingqing is the first monk who prepared for the mountain and Xingfeng. Obviously, Cui Dongshan intends to create a next sect tradition. Every next master of Qingping sword sect will be the peak master of Jing Xingfeng. So today, the Qingping sword sect boundary actually has a rough shape, with the immortal capital, clouds steaming, and preserving, 3 mountains rising side by side, 1 main and 2 auxiliary. Although Xiaoma built a hut on the side of Luobaiden, he actually paid attention to Chao Qingqing's retreat and the 2 questions on the top of the mountain. For an ascendant pinnacle sword repairman, it is a little distracting and does not hinder things. Xiao Mo is now waiting for that Eugene to trouble him. That incident has nothing to do with my son, and it has nothing to do with sovereign Shui. Yes, I copied your nest under the sea and emptied your family. Can you bear it? As long as the fat man nodded slightly, Xiao Mo would only practice his hands with Yupu realm. Sweeping the flower platform, only Qing Chaolu and Yu Shihui were left, two fellow villagers who were in a foreign land but didn't feel the slightest hardship, sitting on the railing and chatting together. Little cook, if you give you hundreds of years of work, you can't have the realm of our hidden officials today, right? It's necessary, it won't happen in 1,000 years. Why do I think you are so proud? What? Would you like to drink with me in the future? Forget it, Master will be angry. Brilliant. Be afraid of Master, what kind of sword repair? Among the 9 people of the same age, Bai Xian, Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting, the 3 of them were born in poor alleys. Even Bai Xian's master would follow the tall walls and huge doors of Taixiang Street and Yuhu Street without half a coin. Relationship. And Nalan Yubin, He Gu, Yao Xiaoyan, the 3 of them are all children in the big family. Sun Chun Wang, actually not bad, he is a distant relative of Sun Juyuan, a sword repairman in the Yupu realm. He slanted back and followed Qing Chaolu. They were not bad at all. There was no shortage of money at home, and there was no big money. So it is said that a group of people is based on the origin, and the family is based on the inheritance. Anyway, each has its own life. In Jinchi Great Wall, I don't really like to compare this. Reincarnation is also a skill. If he is not convinced, he will be moved from the back alleys to those 5 streets by virtue of swordsmanship and combat exploits. Because the eldest sword immortal once set a rule of immovability, the house is in the upper 5 streets of the big family, unless there is no one in the family, otherwise there will be only one sword repairer in the lower 5 realms, regardless of age. All have to go to the battlefield to hand over their swords. If you feel that you will die if you go, then move early and move out of the 5 streets as soon as possible before the war. So in the Great Wall of Jinchi, apart from the fact that there are no graves, there is not even a so-called ancestral house. Even a few old sword immortals with lettering on the head of the city, their ancestors have moved their homes in history. Just like the Dong family, during the 100 years when Dong Sanging traveled alone in the wild world, he almost failed to guard his ancestral home. The 5 streets and alleys struck by iron, the sword repairs are like flowing water. Because of the relationship with Mi Daijiangxian, these children are not unfamiliar with the gold-branded Qingshanshan wine from the wine shop in their hometown, the Dumb Lake wine from the back, and the innocent brands. Mi Daijiangxian used to be on the side of Luopa Mountain. He was a leisurely street slipper. Whenever he came to the worship platform, he liked to chat with Bai Xian most about the great achievements of Chun Banzai and Summer Palace. Yu slanted back a few times. In his leisure time practicing swordsmanship, he just sat aside with a small bench, and regarded it as a book. Listening to Miyu, there was an old Jindan monk in the wine shop where the hidden officer and the treasurer folded together. One day, he drank high, and he hung an innocent sign on the wall. On swordsmanship, I can't beat Xiao Dong. But if it's about drinking, even if I put 3 legs on the wine table, I can easily win Xiao Dong. If I am not convinced, come to me. After a beating, my nose and face were blue and swollen the next day. I took advantage of the opening of the wine shop just before dawn, and ran again, but on the opposite side of the accident sign, I wrote one more sentence: yesterday, I was too drunk and drunk. Don't count. As a result, he sneaked home on the way, and it was useless to go sneakily, and he suffered another flying sword. Yu Xianhui said suddenly, "Little cook, we must form golden pills in the future, raise Yuaning, and enter the 5 realms." Qing Chaolu nodded and said, "It is necessary." A group of 3 people left the South Sea Water Palace, stopped for a while at the Shilong Stone, and then went to the old site of the Dad Yulong Palace, which was connected to the sea. Finally, the group of 3 officially landed ashore on the west coast of Tongisao. A middle-aged man of abundance, accompanied by a beautiful maid in colorful clothes, and a small, dignified man who obeyed. It was Li Yeho, one of the newly promoted 4 sea kings. When he set foot on the land, his figure was slightly stagnant, but he quickly returned to normal. The maid on the side is carrying a piano bag, named Huang Wan. She likes to eat silverfish in the book, and the master next to her happens to be the #1 book collector in the entire Hauran world. The short man carried a short spear on his back. He is now a water ghost. He was an end martial artist before his death. By coincidence, he went to the Jiaoyue Lake where the owner had changed many times in history and served as the chief guest. Huang Wan most admires Lu Qi, and at the same time most annoys someone who brags and does not draft. The Jiujing Wufu named Shiman, who was born in Lixiaozu, is a terrestrial dragon with its roots and feet. Before, Shiman was in the former site of the Dragon Palace in Dadu, and he had a battle with his predecessors. At that time, in the spectator team, beside the true Dragon King Zhu, there was still a cowering young man. He habitually bowed his head and bent over, as if he was extremely afraid of Wang Zhu. Even when the young man was talking with Wang Zhu, his eyes were erratic and never dared to face Wang Zhu. Huang Wan smiled and said, "Mrs. Tan Dan knows how to be a man." This old master of Lushwiking, the road number Qingzhong, is now the master of land and water transportation. The fishing ferry who guarded Xialongxi back then seems to be in Jidu, Beiju Luzhou now. And those Nanhai lone horsemen were actually given to Jigue by Mrs. Tan Dan in private. I heard that the Zhuizhu in the Lushwiking treasury was directly emptied and given away. This is not a small amount of money. Get connected everywhere. In fact, on the side of the host, Mrs. Tan Dan also expressed her respect, and her courtesy was not light. Li Yeho smiled. "You will learn more in the future," finally asked. "This time we are going to the pole to talk to Chen Pingon about business. Will we be killed?" Huang Wan angrily said, "What kills pigs?" Finally said, "That's what it means." Li Yeho sighed. "Chen Pingon will discuss it very well. I'm afraid that person is responsible for the guests." Embroidered tiger. Or half an embroidered tiger Chui Yang. Finally asked, "Can I discuss it with Chen Pingon? The previous one is too much to see." Li Yeho shook his head and said, "This time is not appropriate, let's talk about it later." In the previous meeting at the Zhongte Confucian Temple, in their spare time, there were a large number of people, and they all went fishing at the Mandarin Duck and Zhu. The strangest thing is that these guys are mostly end-of-bound martial arts, and the lowest is also the mountain state. If you are a wandering martial artist, it seems that you are not qualified to sit and fish there. And among the great masters of martial arts, there is Zhang Taoxia, who is nicknamed Long Bow. There is a middle-aged man next to Zhang Taoxia, sitting on a bamboo stool that he carries around all the year round, with a small fish basket tied around his waist. In the eyes of outsiders, he has been wandering the ruins of the ancient battlefield all his life, and he does not ask anyone. Don't fight with people either. The fish basket around this person's waist is not the Dragon King basket, but a treasure known as the Wandering Immortal Cave, bottomless cave, on the top of the mountain. It is rumored that it can raise tens of thousands of ghosts and ghosts at the same time. Because this pure martial artist is too isolated from the world, I don't know his name. There was only one person, who leaked his tongue with others at the wine table, calling him Laoji, the admirer of Mrs. Aoyama gods, Tianzi, the kind who didn't dare to look at her from a distance, just look far away, miss her a lifetime of infatuation. There are also the masters and apprentices of Leigong Temple in Iazhao, Pei Xiang and Lu Suiyu. Wang Fushuan of Baijiluzu. Wu Tan, the martial sage of Tongisao. The chief guest of the Moon Lake, finished. In addition, there are many top sects in 10 dynasties. The total number of people must be a small 20. Only Pei Cup, Song Changjing, and Li Er were not present at the time. The younger generation, Chao Xiai, Xing Qian, and Yu Yufu, also did not appear. Of course, there is something to talk about Li Er's fist. The old man Wang Fuwan had a conclusion that the old man takes care of himself. After all, he was the only one at the time who really had a fist with Li Er. Li's second fist is not heavy and unhappy, so. Half of the mountain warriors have bet on the no-loss game of Liu Zai Aizhou, but of course they all bet that Chao Xiai will not lose a boxing in the next 500 years. In fact, she is a pure martial artist, and his lifespan is far inferior to that of a gas trainer. Even a territorial martial artist who has reached the top is only 300 years old. But there are exceptions, such as Zhang Taoxia or Tonggishao Huang Yiyun and his ilk. This is also the reason why Zhang Taoxia was the top martial artist in the world before the rise of the Pei Cup, and she sat in this position for thousands of years, but the old man was reluctant to ask people about it for many years. Zhang Taoxia did. It's just like idle clouds and wild cranes, just obsessed with fishing. The reason is very simple. In the eyes of the old man himself, as a pure martial artist, it is the biggest impurity to be reluctant to die. Only Yu Panshui, the supreme emperor of the Xianmi dynasty, and a bully who claimed to be Zhou Paoshan, instead of treating money as money, they dropped 500 and 1,000 Gu Yuqin respectively, betting that Chao Xiai would lose. Wait until the young hidden official was on Yuanyang's side, under all eyes, and fought with the immortal Yunyao, and then on the Gongdalin side, there was a terrifying blue and white battle on the other side of the Gongdalin. So some people started to mutter, but unexpectedly Lu from Aizhou gave a sentence, which has been sealed. According to legend, in this gambling game, the Lu family in Aizhou, who was sitting in the village, gathered almost 40,000 Gu Yuqian and lost too. Therefore, many old monks on the mountain, as well as a large number of emperors, generals, and patriarchs of the great dynasty, treat the bet as if they were to bet for the teacher, or for the direct disciple, or for the treasury, to save money for interest. Although the collection is late, you have to wait patiently for 500 years, but it is destined to make a steady profit without losing the income due to droughts and floods. The credibility of Liu's gold-letter signboard is very strong and reliable. Those who have something good, the more they think about it, the more they feel that something is wrong. Don't you lose the game, Lu Jubao, this the god of wealth. Would he lose if he rushed to Chao Xiai early? 10,000 steps back and said, even if anyone really beats Chao Xiai, the Lu family of Aizhou will also make a lot of money. Sure enough, there is no business in the world where Lu Jubao will lose money. In the Dad Yulong Palace site, after the three of Li Yeho left, the beautiful woman took off her boots and sat on the bank, dipping her feet into the lotus pond water, gently rippling ripples. Gong Yan remembered the previous confrontation. I still wonder how I can't understand how the young man in the yellow hat and blue shoes at the time found out the hidden traces of all of them at the same time, especially the Jade Taoist who was of Fairyland and was extremely proficient in escape. The means were precisely traced by the wisps of sword aura, aiming at them one by one. The burly man said, "Is it because of his heart?" Gong Yan shook her head, not very similar, not to mention that a few of them, they are not young children who have just gone down the mountain, they will all be extremely careful when they are cloned, holding their breath. Not to mention listening to the heart of a monk, not everyone can do it, just like the ordinary master at the foot of the mountain, naturally he can't hear the heartbeat of others. On the mountain, monks do the same to monks. Probably only Fu Lu Yuxian, Dragon Tiger Mountain Zhao Tian Lai, Fire Dragon True Man, these great monks who have ascended to consummation, may be able to listen to the voices of immortals and even monks in the same realm. Dao Hao Li Ba, who had quenched his palm, suddenly said, "It is a heartstring that is more subtle than the voice of his heart." Daoist Jade rubbed his eyebrows, and said helplessly, "Could it be an ascendant swordsman? It's just that we are in the world, is there such a number one person? Gong Yen quickly patted her chest, and smiled charmingly. I scared my old lady to death. Li Ba said, like the Taoist Nin, and the fairy Chow Rong of Aquarius Island, it seems that they all popped up suddenly, just get used to it. In the water pavilion, Jigue leaned against the railing, resting his cheek with one hand in a daze. At the bottom of the steps outside, there is a teenager standing with a slightly raised forehead. There used to be a four-legged snake in Mud Bottle Alley. Song Jisin, who was an eyesore, was thrown into the yard next door several times, but he crawled back every time. She was often stepped on the sole of the shoe by her maid, GQ, and repeatedly ran, otherwise it would be early in the morning to pick water from the lockwell. After listening to some breeze, GQ returned to his house and saw it. He often kicked it. This young man who had not succeeded in refining the shape for a long time was given the surname Wang, Cheongju, and Yushao by Jigue, and he was rewarded with a Taoist name, Hansu. The young man was carrying a glossy purple gourd on his back. GQ turned his head and raised his chin. The poor young man immediately understood, moved quickly, hid in a place where the master could not see, and stood, lest the master's eyes become annoyed. Jigue laughed and said, I heard that there was an execution platform in the ancient heavenly court. There were a few magic weapons, which were specially used to deal with the earth immortals and dragons who violated the heavens. In addition to the sword and the broken mountain halberd, there are two more. The knife seems to be called Xiaotu and Zhangkan. That Zhangkan is in Qin Pingan's hands. I would have known that I would not let you watch the wind from afar at sea. When you two meet, you will definitely dislike each other, and then click. Click, tut. The teenager shrank his neck in fright. Xiaomo started to practice cultivation at Luobao Beach on the banks of the Tsingyi River, saying that it was cultivation, but in fact it was turning a book. For today's Xiaomo, the only practice is to choose an avenue above the road no one has gone before, so that he can hope to be among the 14th realms. What's more, even if the great monk who ascends to the top of the realm finds a way to the sky, the difficulty is still as great as an ordinary master. Otherwise, for thousands of years, the number of monks in the 14 realms in the world would not be so scarce. Furthermore, Xiaomo also set a threshold for himself. He must be a pure sword repairman and enter the 14th realm in one fell swoop, without taking a side door or taking shortcuts. Like the awe-inspiring swordsman Pei Min, one of the three great swordsmanship Pei Min, it is estimated that he also has this thought. Anyway, this Pei Min, Xiaomo would definitely find a chance to ask Jian. Xiaomo placed some futons and benches casually on the open space outside the hut that looked like a suntan field. Cui Wei, on the right of Sui, the two Yuanying realm sword repairmen often go to Luobaotan to inquire about sword practice with Mr. Xiaomo. Qing Chaolu and Yu Shihui go as often, and Pei Qian will occasionally come to watch while he is busy at the ferry. As long as someone visits, Xiaomo will sit on the bamboo chair under the eaves, with the bamboo stick on her knees, as if. Cui Dongshan left Mishue Peak this day and came to a blue cliff on Qingping Peak, bending his fingers and gently knocking on the door. At the top floor of the immortal mansion, Chen Pingan calmed his mind, opened his eyes, and nodded. Chen Pingan sits cross-legged, with a green shirt and bare feet. Everything is kept simple. There are no extra decorative objects in the house. Compared with the previous case in front of Chen Pingan, there is only one more horizontal sword for traveling across continents. Cui Dongshan just stood outside the door of this small Dongtian, without any nonsense, and talked to her husband. Fei Jin sent a letter from the Longgong site, saying that it is the new South Sea King Li Yeho, and he is coming to our side today as a guest. I guess he came to discuss the sale and purchase of the water transport in the Luluo River. The husband just keeps on purifying and practicing. The students can go to discuss the price with Li Yeho. The gentleman can rest assured that even if the husband does not show up, Li Yeho will never think of Xiandu. The mountain hasn't served guests well. It's enough to have me treat guests. Li Yeho and Jigui are one of the 4 sea kings, so if you want to leave your own waters and enter the boundary of the East China Sea, you must first ventilate with Jigui. Moreover, you need to report to the Zhongtu Confucian Temple. After getting permission, Li Yeho can leave. Chen Pingan suddenly got up and put on a pair of cloth shoes. Wait a minute, I just have something to go out. I'm going to take Xiaomo and take a trip to Xiaolongqiu. Let's go down the mountain together. Walking out of the Changchun Xiaodongshan, which was used as a temporary cultivating place, Chen Pingan came to Cui Dongshan and said with a smile, "It's better for you to go there, just pay the price on the land." I talked to Li Shuijun about business, and it was really open can't speak. To say that he is a bag fast, Chen Pingan is really a bit emboldened, and he will never belittle himself, but is ruthless to kill familiar. Because Li Yeho, who was still at the Confucian Temple Gongdalan at the time, was still the Moon Lake Shuijun, brought a maid with a very high rank in robes, and an unsurprisingly looking martial artist. They visited the husband together. Li Yeho gave a gift at that time. The priceless piece of drunk as mud stickers, apart from the wine bugs, in the copybooks is extremely rare. The key is the copybook itself, which can be regarded as a large lake of 600 miles rich in water transportation, and it is an excellent place that the genus of dragons dreams of. The place of monasticism. After going down the mountain together, Cui Dongshan went to find Li Yeho. Chen Pingan found Xiao Mo at Luobayan and went to Xiaolongqiu together. Above an intercontinental ferry. Millet grains, small head swayed, small shoulders swayed, shoulders carried a golden pole, holding a green bamboo stick, and going around the ferry at night to watch the mountains. Uncle Bai Xian sat on the railing of the bow, holding the rail with both hands, looking up at the bright moon, and exclaimed, "I am so valued by the hidden officer, and there is a long way to go." Named the Dao surname, and wanted to participate in the next festival by himself, that little hermit, Chen Li, received this treatment? The colorful world, soaring to the city. The shop was closed, and there was a man with a stooped figure standing behind the counter, drinking wine, and looking at the wall. After the second shopkeeper leaves, there will be no new accident cards. Some people have made troubles, but they are finally passed away by the man. Some restaurants in Feishing City wanted to follow the gourd to draw a scoop and copy this action. As a result, no one was in favor of it, and it was embarrassing to be a mess. Yup. Heaven and the world, the only one. How do you learn? Impossible. Think about it. Starting tomorrow, I will learn to write with the second shopkeeper. I will write a letter of appointment for Nayland Saihuan, who has never had a daughter-in-law. Beside Miss Zhou, she doesn't have a smiling face without me. This must be the case. Since Aliang said it personally, I have to ask Miss Zhou. I will go tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. Please don't scold Aliang anymore. Unlike me, you never scold him for a while. Whoever dares to be my face in the future, if you scold him for a while, it's asking someone Zhao Jian with me. Aliang is a close friend at the gambling table, and even a good match at the wine table. You actually don't understand his good intentions of my family, only I understand, so you can kowtow to me. My name is Miao Ran. As for the last name, it is engraved on the top of the city. Want to live in the jar all my life. Swordsmanship is not high, but I haven't been counseled. I heard from Aliang that there is a kind of building called brothel in the world, and there is a kind of wine called flower wine in the world, but the second shopkeeper said no. Who should I trust? Sun Juyuan is actually poor in swordsmanship, so he deceived women from other villages. I heard that monk Haoran, all pay attention to a good pen and inkstone for life and enjoyment, don't they need to practice swords? The land sword fairy of the two realms of Jindan Yuanying. Haha, I'm so ridiculous. It turns out that the sword fairy there is cheaper than the drinks of the girl. Me Dajiangxian can enter the summer palace, why can't I go? You Kingmihu, you sword sages, listen to my advice, the left and right swordsmanship is actually so general, it is the number of 3 axes. If you don't believe it, go and ask the sword. Spring dreams are easy to find, but golden cores are hard to find. Zhong Yuan never came here to drink, I really missed too much. I woke up and liked her better than yesterday. Han Huizi of Taihui Jianzong has rescued me twice, and has not thanked me personally. I shouldn't. Xie Songhua looked at me twice, there is a play. Wine beauties are Xianxiang, everyone, we are not drunk return. I beg you to help that dog Day. Who is a great sword immortal who is good? Go to Qingtu and engrave a word in front of the fierce word. Just take it as a surname for him. Pick up a son for nothing. Happy. The person I like has a way of punching, and drinking is the best style. It doesn't matter if he is not a sword repairer, this girl is. 10 drunkards and 9 palates, what can I do? Thinking of a monarch is like a crescent moon, full night and night. The next big sword fairy engraved on the head of the city will definitely be my Yuanliang. A safety card was hung beside. I believe that after Yuanliang, there will be more engraved swordsmen, such as Du Ling. In fact, on the wall of the small wine shop, there are a lot of such a pair of accidental signs hanging next to each other. Maybe friends who drink at the same table, full of alcohol, and take advantage of the wine to finish writing one by one. It could also be 2 Jianxiu who didn't know each other at all before, or just a familiar face, but never spoke to each other, just like a temporary visit, and said hello. The second shopkeeper became an official and went to the summer palace, and it seemed that drinking would not have a taste. Luo Xini in the summer palace is really beautiful. The second shopkeeper will get the moon first when he is near the water. The blessing is not shallow. What is the second shopkeeper? What is the new hidden official? I see you outside. Every time I squat by the side of the road to drink with him, how often do I call him by his name and call him Chen Pingon? Let's pull it down. Yu Huang Shou and the second shopkeeper drink again and again, and you can't wait to lower your head into your crotch, a lot of age, and laugh like a son. Someday there is really no need to fight, just go to Beiju Luzhou. Remember to call me together. As Lu Ji said, maybe the second shopkeeper is a woman, and she hides so well. No wonder Yu Yufu is so fierce, it turns out that women embarrass women. So what about girl Ning? Worry. Reading for good luck, peace and tranquility. At first glance, I borrowed it from the second shopkeeper, but the words are good. Quit drinking is harder than practicing sword. What's the difficulty of quitting alcohol? I quit every day. Nothing happened today. It's safe and sound. Sword of Coming Chapter 903. The moon star is faint, and the mountain is getting higher. The tip of his ears moved slightly, and he suddenly turned his head to look into the distance of the night, and said in a deep voice, Master, the embroidered tiger is here. Li Yeho hummed, reminding them with his heartfelt voice, remember to pay attention to the wording. No matter what Mr. Chui said to me next, even if you have heard it, don't worry about it, let alone take care of it. The maid, Huang Wan, who was tuning the strings, raised her eyes along the final line of sight. It was vaguely visible that there was a white figure in the distance, which seemed to be against the ground. Suddenly her figure was held high again and again, and Huang Wan's line of sight continued to rise. Pick, the bright moon hangs in the air, the shape of the mustard seed just turned its back to the full moon, and the person accelerated the wind, and suddenly hit the mountain top, like a person in the bright moon, relegated to the world. Huang Wan put the guqin into the bag again, and stood behind the master with the finale. The young boy had a red mole on the center of his eyebrows, dressed in white, and his large sleeves were dangling outside the mountain. Even Huang Wan is a tough Taoist man who has to admit that the young man in front of him is shining brightly, making the mountain and moonlight eclipsed. It is really a wind who is not losing his master. Cui Yang visited Jiaoyue Lake twice before, and the maid Huang Wan happened to be not in the Shui mansion. She either went to Yanji Mountain to find her friends in her boudoir, or went to Baiwa Footy. Have friends come from afar? Li Yi, his eyes were bright and he seemed to be waiting for this day's reunion. He had been waiting for years, put away the yellowed and old PU fan in his hand, and then took off the mask covering his face. He was a beautiful man and stood up and said, "Yeho has seen it." Mr. Cui. Cui Dongshan said indifferently, "Congratulations to Yeho Rongsheng, you can call me Dongshan." In the past, the 3 Five Lakes kings, including Li Yeho, were based on the Golden Jade genealogy enshrined in the Confucian Temple to enshrine the gods of mountains and waters. They became kings of the 4 seas on the basis of their rank theory. They are just flat, but now they have great authority and extensive jurisdiction. Far beyond the past. At the same time, the 3 big lakes in Mers Lake have made up for the lack of the 5 lakes, which is a veritable promotion. Li Yeho smiled and nodded. Among the big figures who publicly fought against Howren Jiaxing in the past was the Moon Lake sovereign Li Yeho. Therefore, after Li Yeho became the king of the Great Lakes, even if the Moon Lake was among the 5 lakes, it was actually the closest to the Confucian Temple, but Li Yeho was always not close to the Confucian Temple, and was estranged from the saints and sages. He and Cui Yang, embroidered tiger, can be regarded as old acquaintances. Of course, there is a big difference in age between the 2 sides, because Li Yeho and Bai are also people of the same age, and they came from the same country. Li Yeho was born as a tycoon and a great minister in the temple. Bai also belongs to the opposite Yimin. Later, he also caught a glimpse in the capital. Then the boats were distributed and drifted away, so the 2 of them did not have much to do with each other. On the contrary, in the past years, Cui Yang, Zhua Zhua, and Jun Qian had visited the Moon Lake together. Within a 10-year period, the 2 sides had 8 consecutive hands-on talks. The other party was allowed to take long exams without time. As a result, Li Yeho almost lost the book warehouse and half of the Moon Lake. Because there are a total of 8 games, Li Yeho wins 7 games and loses another game, and even the identity of Dahu Shuijun is gone. The reason for the handicap was because the opponent took the initiative to give up the bet he deserved after winning the chess. Afterwards, Li Yeho hand-talked the 8 rounds and compiled them into a book of Autumn Water Book, and kept repeating the games, only to discover the mystery, and the difference between the 2 sides' chess strengths was much greater than he had imagined. It was a huge disparity. However, in addition to the introduction of the king into the urn in the first game of chess, Xiuhu also showed the enemy's weakness in the other 7 games, but it could make Li Yeho unaware, always thinking that the loss of chess was just a difference. Later, when Cui Yang rebelled against the Wenqing line, he also secretly walked through the Moon Lake house. Cui Yang asked him if he would like to travel a long distance and do something for this world, but he was turned down by Li Yeho. Cui Yang didn't seem to be disappointed either. Before leaving, he just saw the chess book on the table and casually said with a smile, "It is better to change the name of the chess book to Pawn Bull Book." Li Yeho, who was born as a Taoist priest, was only dumb and silently sent the embroidered tiger gift out of the country. It's not that I'm afraid of getting into trouble, nor is it reluctant to be the Shui Jun, but after Li Yeho became a god, he became more and more disinterested, as if all his ambitions had been lost to the once-selves, once talented. A child prodigy, a young Taoist priest who was ordered to live in a secluded mountain in the mountains but had a heart for the mountains and rivers. He came out as an official to turn the tide on the fallen young civil servants. He continued the country, repaired the mountains and rivers, saved the people in the middle-aged and twilight years, and finally succeeded. Turned into a of mountains and rivers, no longer caring about family, state and human affairs, just buying books and collecting books. www. Until novel. Calm repairing books. Cui Dongshan turned his head and changed his face. He smiled and joked, "Brother Killing, how come you haven't seen him in 100 years, and his level hasn't risen, but he is taller? Is there a unique secret? Why don't you teach me?" The short man blushed and said dully, "Nothing, Mr. Cui, don't talk nonsense." On embroidery Tiger Cui Yang sighed, bowing his head and acknowledging it was not ashamed. As for why Cui Yang became a young man, God knows. Isn't it normal for strange people to do strange things? Before coming, the owner had reminded him in Huangwan, if he saw a young man whose name was changed to Cui Dongshan, he could be regarded as an embroidered tiger. Huangwan didn't realize until this moment that the man beside him seemed to be more than an inch taller. No, it was a full 2 inches. She suddenly wanted to understand the mystery, and said angrily, "Finish, did you get kicked by the donkey in your head, and you have to learn from Ouyang even this kind of thing?" It turned out to be the one who finished learning that dog day, and the mystery is hidden in the boots. Someone had brought a young scholar, and an old man in yellow clothes with a fairy-like bones, to visit Jiayue Lake together. Then on the other side of the steps, the guy took off his shoes and put them back on immediately. It's good for the young scholar to say that from beginning to end, he was well-mannered and polite, but the yellow-clothed old man next to the young man was really unexpected and surprised Huangwan. At the time, he was in the water mansion, and he was unpredictable. Very high, and soon became famous on the side of Yuanyangzu, claiming to be a Taoist, and hitting a blockbuster as soon as he shot it, and the face of Nan Guangguang, who was also a great monk in the Ascension realm, was lost. Li Yeho opened the door and said, "I believe Mr. Cui knows exactly what Yeho is asking for this time, so he can make a price." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "It's rare to retell the past. Why not talk about things while playing chess?" Li Yeho said, "As long as there is no bet, Yeho can leave Tongyi's Hao later and bite the bullet and accompany Mr. Cui to talk about a round." Cui Dongshan persuaded, "Small gambling, if you accidentally get out of the moon game by Yeho, isn't it a Lin Mei Tan? I can let it go first." Seeing that Li Yeho was unmoved, Cui Dongshan rubbed his chin with one hand and extended with the other. "If the first is not enough, I can let the 2 sons again, how about?" As a result, the Deshui Jun still pretended to be deaf and dumb. Cui Dongshan stomped his feet, shook his sleeves, and complained, "Yeho, you are too arrogant. Do you want to be a go-beginner and make a fortune? Turn off." In all dynasties, the Yilan Chess Academy under the mountain had the custom of letting 9 men play against each other. If a chess player wanted to enter the room and gain a rank, he had to pass the 9-sun pass of the national chess player. It seems that Li Yeho has made up his mind not to talk to Cui Dongshanshu, but smiled and said, "Mr. Cui, let's just talk about business. Yeho is not here for a tour of the mountains and water. He needs to return to the South China Sea to the ferry immediately. Xiandushan has a lot of work now, so I won't waste Mr. Cui's precious time." Cui Dongshan sees that the other party is not getting the bait, so what a way is it? "I was so afraid of being bullied by the back then. I couldn't hold Li Yihe's head to play chess. I had to talk about business. My husband will sell you at most. Transported into water." Li Yeho asked immediately, "Is Mr. Chen currently sitting on 10% of the Luluo River water transport, or 10% of the entire Luluo River water transport in the past?" Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "It depends on the sincerity of Brother Yeho." Li Yeho thought about it a little bit. "No matter what kind of 10% water transport, I will show the sincerity that I expected." Wenqing Hedao is located in the broken mountains and rivers of the three continents, including South Pasua Island, and Li Yeho, as the great water monarch who controls the circulation of the South Sea, can adjust the flow of water in an appropriate amount without breaking the prohibition and being accountable by the Confucian Temple. Is not a fake public aid for personal gain. During this trip, Li Yeho didn't intend to fight the embroidered tiger at all. What kind of price should be set? If you don't make any changes, you can do it. If it doesn't work, I will leave. Cui Dongshan began to jump and curse, and his sleeves snapped and snapped. Fucking, Li Yeho, are you right with my husband? You are a gentleman who is not good at doing business, you can be such a bastard. Ah. Now in Hauran, there are a handful of big monks who have been fed all day long and have nothing to do. Let people help collect various comments on the young hermit from the wild world. Li Yeho wanted to buy 10% of the water transportation of the entire wild Yuluo River. Of course, if Chen Pingan was willing to give 15%, it would be the best, the more the better. Li Yeho took out a booklet from his sleeve, 10% dragged down the river water transport. This is the detailed deployment of my Nanhai mansion and 300,000 people in the next 100 years. There is no problem with the Confucian Temple. I can guarantee Nan Pasua. Within 100 years, the continent has been in a smooth weather, far better than in previous years, up and down the mountains, ushering in a good situation that has not been seen in 3,000 years. Cui Dongshan reached out to take the booklet, opened the homepage, rolled his eyes, and dropped a booklet written by Shui Jun directly on the ground. He stepped heavily on his foot and waved his sleeve. You can roll. Huang Wan was faintly angry. She wanted to say something but stopped. If it hadn't been for the reminder of the master before, she would have cursed someone. This person is so disrespectful to his owner, even if you are half the embroidered tiger Cui Yang. As a result, she was snapped and gently pulled her sleeves. Cui Dongshan squinted at the maid carrying the piano bag and sneered, "Why, are you going to play the trick of insulting the minister to death with me? Are you threatening me or frightening me? I'm a coward, scaring me to death. You don't have to pay for your life, but you have to lose money. That's a lot of money, astronomical. Be careful to hurt Yeho and help you wipe your ass." Huang Wan flushed with anger. Li Yeho looked as usual, stretched out his hand and grabbed the booklet back in his hand, patted the dust on the cover lightly. If it's just embroidering tigers, it'll turn around and leave. Li Yeho once again stretched out his hand and handed the booklet to the white-clothed boy, as if he was talking to himself, but the person who sits on the river dragging down the river is a close disciple of Wenqing. He is a young man who established his next sect in Tonggishao. Sword Fairy. Cui Dongshan was expressionless with both hands in sleeves. Huang Wan was full of anger, and this time he just grabbed her arm. Li Yeho was not at all annoyed, turned around and looked at the night scene in the distance, but still did not put the book in his sleeve. Successful and super talented, he doesn't fall into disrepair in his actions, he just horrifies others, but the people of the right size, but the movement and the quiet, the law is strict, the advance and retreat, they are all in the rules. Yeho sincerely admires the former and sincerely respects the latter. It is true that as Mr. Cui said, I am a gentleman can deceive others, but I have my difficulties, and I can't just act on my own preferences if I'm in my position. If you do not take responsibility for the authority of the King of the South Sea, then the thickness of this book can be at least doubled. As of mountains and rivers, he will give the world a kind of selfishness, change the luck of the place at every turn, and drive the atmosphere of the mountains and rivers. The hidden dangers here must not be overlooked. Cui Dongshan knelt down, took out some dried fish from Luopa Mountain from his sleeve, and gently threw it into his mouth. A school-aged child is ignorant of gazing at the sky, and if he raises his hand, he can pick up the stars. Li Yeho also squatted down and handed over the booklet for the third time tonight. Cui Dongshan snorted coldly, "Don't pay attention to me, I'm sulking." Li Yeho put the booklet gently on Cui Dongshan's arm, smiled and said, "There is a dilemma in the world, you can become an immortal, if you have something to ask for help." Cui Dongshan smiled happily. After eating the dried fish, he shook his arm slightly, the book bounced up, reached out and grabbed it, and when the fan shook, he said, "There are two bitterness on the ground, bitterness is like eating coptis, and there is no money in the bag." Huang Wan stood behind the white-clothed boy, and she quietly lifted her foot, pretending to kick someone. As a result, the white-clothed boy plopped, fell directly to the ground, fell a dog and ate shit, turned his head and said angrily, "Scheming me? Losing money?" Huang Wan was dumbfounded. Finishing is also an unbelievable look. Embroidering tigers back then was unparalleled. When I first visited Jiahua Lake, Cui Yang, the first literary saint, had already become famous all over the world. Even if he didn't like going out, he had heard of Cui Yang's evaluation of a certain Confucian temple. Yangshu Mountain stands tall, and the ancestral temple implements. It is unknown who said it. There are speculations that it is the leader of the Confucian temple, but there are also personal comments that say that it is the Saint of Rites, and some people even say that this phrase is from the mouth of the Most Holy Master. Sitting under the eaves of the water pavilion, sitting on the ground and playing against Shui Jun, when one of the games ended, heavy rain, thunder and lightning, black clothes twisted and white, thunderbolt over his eyebrows, his hands could not turn his eyes. Li Yeho smiled and drew out a fan of mysterious material from his sleeve. It is both an apologize and a gift. It is quite appropriate to give it to Chen Jianxian. Huang Wan felt distressed. This is a priceless old collection of the Moon Palace, and the owner usually cherishes it the most. The fan is called Relief from the Heat, which means a beautiful fan. The bright moon produces a cool treasure fan. According to legend, it was personally made by the Minghua co-owner in ancient times. Made. It's just tossing around the world, hurting the rank, and now it is only a semi-immortal treasure on the mountain. The key is that the treasure fan can be used to refining and transform into an object of attack, and it can also be used to overcome mountains and rivers, gather energy and luck, and get twice the result with half the effort. Especially the thing of absorbing the moonlight is blessed. Cui Dongshan put the booklet and Tuan fan into his sleeve, without a word of thanks, suddenly laughed, stretched out his hand to support Li Yi's shoulder, and slowly stood up and said, "Before coming, my husband only confessed a word to me. Tonight, everything is as expected. Almost not bad. Pissed off. Can I, Cui Dongshan, be angry with a defeated man? It's troublesome." Li Yeho stood up and said with a smile, "Listen with good ears." Cui Dongshan said solemnly, "Mr. said, the market cannot go down when it comes to buying and selling, but there must be superficial skills for outsiders." When Li Yeho heard the string, he understood the elegant intentions, and instantly understood him, holding back his laugh, so as not to be mistaken for being a good bargain. He nodded sternly, "Understood. Yeho will use a means of keeping no traces to let the other two. My colleague Wei Shui knows the real price of the transaction between Nanhai Mansion and Luopashan." Li Yeho's said goodbye and stood up and smiled. "Whenever there is real peace in the world, I will invite Mr. Cui to be a guest in the South China Sea and play the 9 games under the moon, so that one more Chiu Shui chess book can be made." After Cui Dongshan returned the salute, the hippie said with a smile, "It's easy to talk about it, let alone playing games in Nanhai Palace. It's okay to fly with Brother Yeho to the middle of the moon. In this way, even if the quality of the game is far worse than that of the Kaiyun game, but our brother's chess position is much higher than that of Beta Sheng. By the way, next time we meet again, don't call me Mr. Cui. If you are uncomfortable, you will either call me Dongshan or call me Tong Gong Dao friends. Cui Dongshan now has a new Taoist name for himself, Tong Gong. Li Yeho nodded, ready to leave the land of Tonggishao. Cui Dongshan asked tentatively, "Don't you really go to my Xianda mountain to sit?" Li Yeho shook his head and said, "No, there are a lot of things in Shui Mansion, so it's not appropriate to stay ashore for long." Huang Wan asked softly, "Why did Qin Shanju become your husband?" Cui Dongshan can't stand this lady with long hair and short knowledge, and he rolled his eyes and said, "Learning to be a teacher and a model, why my husband can't be my husband? I can't be a student of my husband." Li Yeho said roundly. In fact, Huang Wan admires the hidden official very much. Huang Wan nodded his head, this is a fact. Last time in Gongdalan, the young hermit was standing next to Wen Xing, helping his husband to deal with others, and the young master gave people a sense of spring breeze. The white-clothed boy immediately frowned and said, "Sister Huang Wan, I was wrong. If we meet tonight, there is something wrong with me. I beg my sister to bear with me." Huang Wan really doesn't adapt to the treacherous aura on this young man. Is this person a so-called wise and near demon? Isn't he already being held hostage by the other party? Otherwise, why did the master remind her many times and kill her? The more Huang Wan thought about it, the more worried he got, and he squeezed out a smile, which was regarded as an agreement. Li Yeho took the two of them away from the top of the mountain with Yufeng. He turned his head and looked behind him, and saw the white-clothed boy still standing in the same place, standing alone, a lonely crane in the world, and a clear and high spirit. Li Yeho seemed to guess the mind of the rebel, and laughed in his heart. That's wrong, it's a phoenix tree that day, and the young phoenix is clearer than the old phoenix. Huang Wan said, "Master, when I stood next to Cui Dongshan before, I didn't feel anything. For some reason, I was a little scared now." Li Yeho sighed and said with a complicated expression, "Same as well." Huang Wan said with emotion, "It's easier to get along with the hidden official." Li Yeho hesitated, but still had no words. "I wanted to say that it was because the old scholar Wen Xing was present, the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, was in the Confucian Temple Kung Dalin at that time. Once you are an enemy, give it a try." Xiaolongqiu, ancestral mountain Longmian Mountain, not far from the tip of the heart where the Zhushatang is located, there is a closed fairy cave with the official script seal carved on one side of the stone wall, beyond the sky. Mountain Master Lin Huizhi is now retreating here to heal his injuries. Outside the gate of the cave, there is a pair of shoe, young and beautiful, slim, like a double lotus. The appearance and posture of the two sisters are like a mold carved out. They are now responsible for guarding the master. They saw two figures, not far away. One of the sisters frowned slightly and reminded, "Uncle Quan, Chief Zhang, our master is now in retreat." Quan Qingqiu came here with the Chief Keqing, with a pocket fishing rod hanging from his waist, like a saber. Wrapped the whole body with silver silk thread, like moonlight. This one of his own ancestral zombies, one of the magical powers, can be regarded as a half-dragon king basket, which can use a round of bright moon in the water as a fishing bait to catch the genus of the dragon and many rare water descendants, but it cannot be kept. There are two yuaning on a mountain, and in today's Tonggishao, it is already an extremely top-notch mountain. The Golden Summit Temple and the Blue Tiger Palace in the northern part of the same continent have no such luck for the time being. Quan Qingqiu turned a deaf ear to those two mediocre little hooves, and said in a loud voice, "Senior sister, Master Zuxian has been here for a long time. As the owner of the mountain, if we have been dragged down without seeing us, it would be too bad. It's plausible." The ancestor of the Shangzong, named Situ Mengjing, was named Dragon Beard. He is also an immortal with a great reputation in Middle-earth Shenzhou, where people are like clouds. His family is one of the top tycoons in the Middle-earth God continent, similar to the Miyun Xia family of Iazhao or the Yunlin Jiang family of Aquarius. The branches and leaves of the Situ family spread across several continents. Except for the main shrine in the central earth Shenzhou, there are a large number of branch temples, and besides this master, the Situ family has many talents. The mountain under the branch is continuous, and the mountain is the fairy teacher. There were only 2 sword immortals in the upper 5 realms. One of them had been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, where they practiced swords and killed demons for many years, and returned to the Howran world alive. Unfortunately, they never had the idea of establishing a school. It's just that the sword immortal of the family hall in Lixiaozu has nothing to do with Delongqiu. Even with Situ Mengjing, he is at most distant relatives, and he is notoriously bad-tempered. In his early years, he was in his hometown. He often broke his wrists with Pu He, who is also a sword fairy and has a worse temper, and has asked the sword several times. I heard that the 2 have visited the Great Wall of Jinqi. They still did not agree, and they still disliked each other. They have never drank at the same table. Liqueur. Inside the cave, there was no movement. Too lazy to continue to whistle around with her senior sister, Quan Qingqiu pretended to sigh, and said earnestly, "Sister Yukinjiuli should be good. It is really not appropriate to be distracted by the tedious routine. It is better to just retreat and heal your wounds. Junior brother can promise something today." After the time of Jiazi, regardless of whether the senior sister has already left customs by then, whether or not the bottleneck of Yuaning can be broken by a blessing in disguise, the junior brother is willing to relinquish the identity of the mountain master, and those who can live. On the side of the chapter, the heart is shaken, the dog day, is this going to force the palace? This person with the surname Quan is really not authentic. He didn't greet him at all in advance. I thought that Quan Qingqiu came here to invite senior sister Lin Huizhi to leave the customs. At any rate, I saw the uncle from Delongqiu, otherwise it was indeed inconsistent with etiquette. Lin Huizhi's current so-called retreat, although it is hard to say what kind of situation is waiting for death, but anyone with a discerning eye knows that it is destined to be hopeless. As Shaolongqi's chief guest, he is actually a face-to-face figure in the mountain, like a plaque hanging in the hall against wind and rain, just for outsiders. Xiaolongqiu is now surging under currents, and he opens one eye and closes one eye. Anyway, whoever comes to be the lord of the mountain will not delay him from regularly taking a guest salary, the guest of the sect on the mountain, and the royal family of the dynasty of the mountain. It is recognized as a good errand. I dare not say that it is too fat, but it belongs to lying down to make money. Therefore, Zhang Zhu is not suitable to stir up this Xiaolongqius mountain gate conflict. It should not be mixed, and it is not suitable for fishing in troubled waters. It is easy to eat and hang on the side of Shangzong Delongqiu. The door of the cave house slowly opened, and a middle-aged female cultivator walked out, with a clear and beautiful temperament. It is Lin Huizhi of Master Qingshuang. There is a green gourd hanging from her waist, which is Xiaolongqius treasure of Jinshan, and a half-fairy Gyu gourd. As Xiaolongqius current mountain lord, Lin Huizhi can practice among them. Otherwise, if it is refining, it will be extremely difficult to peel off the tears of restrictions and talk about inheritance. Different from the younger brother Quan Qingqiu, who is a mountain Taoist couple heirs immortal material, Lin Huizhi is a native of Tonggishao, a monk in the Yuanying realm. And her younger brother Quan Qingqiu, who was in the Yuanying realm together with her younger sister, personally created the wild garden for the immortal masters from other towns to visit, and won a lot of good reputation on the mountain. However, he was born in Shangzong. Only when he was young, he came to this practice from Shangzong Delongqiu, and worshipped the former mountain lord as a teacher under the instruction of his parents. Lin Huizhi looked cold and indifferent, and glanced at Zhang Zhu who was standing beside her junior. The old Yuaning with the road name Narcissus immediately called the chief inspector. "I have seen the mountain lord." Lin Huizhi said, "I went to meet Huang Ting, so I went to see Uncle Zhu." Quan Qingqiu smiled and said, "Then I will go to Uncle Zhu first, and wait for senior sister in Panasonic." In the Rui-pointed hut, Huang Ting and a young girl are eating taro simmered over charcoal fire. Huang Ting glanced at Linghu banana fish. The girl was sitting opposite the brazier, exhaling gently towards the hot potato in her hand. In Huang Ting's view, a Xiaolongqiu mountain was full of decay and stagnant water. If she were Delongqia's sect master, she would have no face to tell people that there is a down mountain called Xiaolongqiu in Tonggishao. There were three main forces that had coveted Taiping Mountain. In addition to Xiaolongqiu, there were Wan Yaozong and the Yu dynasty. As for Quan Qingqiu, who looks like a dog, he is actually a watchdog who wags his tail at Jindingwen. He has a good name in vain. When Huang Ting asked Jian Xiaolongqiu and struck Lin Huizhi with a sword, it was not wrong to wrong her. Without the acquiescence of this female mountain owner, how could Quan Qingqiu let a chief guest clerk run to the Taiping Mountain to stay there, calling friends to look in the mirror every day? In fact, after Chen Pingan took a trip to the Ruyijian, Huang Ting was about to leave here to go to the capital of the Yu dynasty, and then return to Taiping Mountain. Had it not been for the Linghu banana fish on the mountain, even if Huang Ting had left Xiaolongqiu, within 100 years, no matter whether the mountain owner was her or Quan Qingqiu, he would not want to repair the Patriarch Hall. Every time the Patriarch's Hall is repaired, it is equivalent to asking her about the sword. Moreover, Huang Ting had a natural instinct that Quan Qingqiu must have colluded with the Wild Monster clan. It's just that she can't show any evidence. The Middle-earth immortal named Dragon Beard came to Xiaolongqiu down the mountain. Looking at Kinkia's favoritism, he was not satisfied with the owner of Lin Huizhi. Although this immortal has always stayed simple after he arrived at Xiaolongqiu. Even the last time Chen Pingan broke into the mountain, the other party did not show up. But his existence itself has already brought a tremendous amount of pressure to all monks Xiaolongqiu who are biased towards the mountain lord or who choose to be neutral. If money in the world is a heavy rain, it seems to be pervasive and omnipotent. But power is a heavy snowfall. Facing the snow outside the door, the people inside the door will be daunted, and it can really freeze to death. If it hadn't been for a certain wolf from Delongqiu, Quan Qingqiu would definitely not dare to make chaos on the side of senior sister Lin Huizhi today. The upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked. The ancient Panasonic stone table has an endgame. A middle-aged man with a natural look bleak and miserable sat at the table and watched the unfinished chess game. He stretched out his hand and twisted a virtual chess piece. In an instant, there was a brand new chess piece on the board. The original position appeared, and the chess pieces in the man's hand dissipated on their own, and the ancient chess game remained the same. Worshipping the moon and refining qi, pulling the stars, undoubtedly immortal handwriting. Therefore, the table is not only a game of chess, but also a game record, but also a formation. There are only 81 chess pieces on the table. If 108 pieces are played on the chessboard, it is a complete array with good time and place. This is similar to the antique shop. The product is incomplete and the price is too much different. For example, a set of 12 flower cups secretly made by Baiwa Footy. If only 11 are collected, even if only one flower cup is missing, the price may be as much as doubled. The man set foot on Xiaolongqiu across the continent this time, and he can barely revisit the old place, but it is nothing but a human being. Back then, Master once played chess with a young immortal, and it was Han Jiangshu, the contemporary lord of the Wanyao sect of Sanshan Blessed Land. I heard that this person wants to start the next sect now, but for some reason, there is no definite movement since the delay. Logically speaking, with the rich heritage of the Sanshan Blessed Land, the long inheritance of Wan Yaozong, and the realm of Han Jiangshi's own cultivation, the establishment of the next sect will only be a matter of course. The reason why he traveled across continents with his master back then was to meet Lin Huizi's teacher. At that time, the Longqiu had high hopes for her, hoping that she could use Xiaolongqiu as a land of Longxing in Tonggishao, and when she reached the 5 realms, she could start her next clan. According to the rules set by the Confucian Temple in the early years, the branches and leaves on the mountain may be more rigorous than the clan pedigree under the mountain. For example, if you want to start the next sect in another continent, the founder of the next sect must become a Yuaning in the local area and then break into the 5 realms. Instead of sending a jade pure monk at random, you can start a sect. Feel free to add leaves and branches. Moreover, such things as the establishment of sects by outsiders are very taboo and are excluded. After all, a foreign power, once the sect is opened, will share a piece of the pie, swallowing the surrounding landscape aura and avenue fortune, just like the Pima sect in Luzhou, North Ju. When it was founded, there were continuous ups and downs and heavy casualties. It was hard to come by. The skeleton beach took a firm foothold, and as a result, it became a neighbor in the ghost mythical valley. It has been regarded as a loss-making business by the major sects of Middle-earth, and it was treated as a negative example. For example, in the past few years, Yu Guizhong successfully established Zhenjingzong in a place called Shijianhu in Beipingzu. The old lord Sun Yuan sent Zhang Shangzhen and Wei Ying to serve as the next sect. These 2 monks later they all became the lord of the upper sect. Thinking how rebellious Zhang Shangzhen was, and how talented Wei Ying was, but in that book Jianhu, he still gave way to the Song court of Dali. These are all proofs that the creation of the next sect is not easy, and it is even harder to gain a foothold. Therefore, in history, there are many large Chinese sects who want to create their next ancestry in other continents. Those who can do it will be infallible. Among these 2 or 3, most of them have not been able to continue the thousands of years of incense. This is like a child of a government official who has a hairpin for generations. When they leave Beijing to become an official, they often run into obstacles everywhere. They are always hard and soft. They will eventually achieve the achievements of their parents. After all, there are still a few people who are in the center. Quan Qingqiu walked here with Zhang Luzhu on foot. Qingqiu saw Uncle Zhu. When Zhang Luzhu gave a great gift, he respected the man as the dragon-beard Xianjun. The man and the chief Keqing who went down the mountain said, "Friends of Daoist Narcissus, you can leave first." The old Yuaning was flattered, saluted and said goodbye, stepped back 3 steps and then turned around, walked a long way out, and dared to leave the Zushan mountain by Yufeng. Situ Mengjing said, "Sit down." Quan Qingqiu took the seat immediately. In Dalongqiu Mountain Taoism, Quan Qingqiu's parents are a pair of mountain Taoists, and the immortal in front of him happens to be the preacher master of that pair of Taoists. Because of this relationship, Situ Mengjing was regarded by brother Xiaolongqiu as supporting Quan Qingqiu, and it was reasonable. The masters of Lin Huizhi and Quan Qingqiu, after arriving at Tonggishao, broke the border early and took advantage of the situation, but when they were in the Yuanying state, they were mistaken by emotions and failed to enter the Yupu state. The demons were in trouble, the retreat failed, the so-called under the mountain the fragrance disappears and the jade perishes, and the death on the mountain disappears. Poor woman, betrayed her true feelings when she met others. However, there were 15 and 16 women's waists, just like willows curled weakly. Situ Mengjing asked, "Quan Qingqiu, did you associate with the wild monster race back then?" Quan Qingqiu's expression remained as usual, and his tone was calm and said, "Patriarch Mingjian, there is no such thing. The immortal Matsushita does not speak, his own pine waves are like a natural sound." Quan Qingqiu regretfully said, "Sister Lin's practice has been too smooth in her life, and her Taoist heart is not tenacious. She failed in 2 retreats, so she has no confidence in the matter of breaking the boundary. She always feels that her deadline has come, and she has been imprisoned by Huang Ting. After slashing with a sword, she naturally became more desperate. Uncle Master and senior sister Lin will come later. Can Uncle Master persuade her to help awaken the person in her dream? Yuaning Dixian has lived in the world for 800 years. Coupled with some means to prolong life, there will be a saying, Chincho, on the mountain. As for the suffix long live on the mountain, the so-called proving the way to live forever and live the same life with the heaven and earth, is a feat that can only be done by the monks of the 14th realms in the legend. Seeing that Uncle Master was still reluctant to speak, Quan Qingqiu carefully brewed her words and said slowly, if senior sister really wants to keep her identity as the Mountain Lord, she can open the skylight to speak brightly. You don't have to splash dirty water on me with Uncle Master in secret, Xiao Longqiu. No matter what the patriarch's ancestors are discussing, they report to the ancestors of Dalongqiu, saying that I tried to usurp the throne. In fact, it does not matter. Anyway, when the door is closed, they are all their own family members. It's just that I didn't expect that Lin Huizhi would use this kind of tricks to keep the position of the Mountain Lord and humiliate my reputation. It's nothing. It's not a big deal that it will cause the Shangzong to be held accountable by the Academy and even the Confucian Temple. Once those rumors spread, the consequences are so serious, not to mention that the Shanshui Dibao has now lifted the ban, and the immortal family who is jealous of the Shangzong will surely promote the situation in secret and publicize the matter. Sister Lin's move is unforgivable. It is simply ungrateful and ashamed of the sect. Cultivation of the door is tantamount to revenge and revenge. This Lin Huizhi is really frustrated. Hearing this, the fairy still looked calm, just staring at the chessboard endgame. This Quan Qingqiu's parents and two disciples are not as talkative as their sons. Situ Mengjing suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed a handful of pine needles in the palm of his hand. The palms pressed against each other and rubbed it carefully. Then, he spread out the palm, and the debris was scattered in all directions. Among them, there were dots of talisman light, which was unusual. Quan Qingqiu didn't dare to say anything more, worried that he would be superfluous and annoy the Uncle Master. Dalongqiu, who doesn't know this ancestor, likes being clean and troublesome. Situ Mengjing finally said, after you leave, tell Lin Huizhi to keep her in retreat. Quan Qingqiu was secretly overjoyed in his heart, got up to say goodbye, and obtained the decree of Uncle Master. The overall situation has been decided. It must be that Lin Huizhi's retreat will not be able to get out, and it has caused unpleasantness in Uncle Master's heart. After Quan Qingqiu left, Situ Mengjing stood up and found an ancient pine and an old tree that has gone through winds and frosts. There is still plenty of business, but it is a pity that young people have no old interest. This immortal is a son of a wealthy clan, or from Wufanger. He is full of spirit, fresh clothes and angry horse, arrogant. Later, the prodigal son probably turned his head back, but fortunately he didn't lose his head. The fairy held the pine with his hands, turned his head and looked at the thatched hut in the distance, and said in his heart, Huang Ting, can you come here to tell? Huang Ting took a small pile of hot taro in his sleeves. After he walked out of the hut, he shrank the mountains and rivers, and stepped to Panasonic. He sat directly on the stone bench, peeled off several taro skins, and put them in his mouth together. Drumming, slurred and said, let's talk, where to fight, you come to pick a place, I can discuss it easily. Sitting across from the stone table, Situ Mengjing said in his heart, Quan Qingqiu coveted the Taiping Mountain Minjiweijing Taoist rhyme without authorization and tried to steal the Taiping Mountain ruins. I have to apologize to you for Dalongqiu Patriarch Hall, if it wasn't for you. In Xialongqiu, I will take a trip in person and come to apologize. Huang Ting sneered, remains. The fairy said, I made a mistake, and I will apologize to you again. Huang Ting said, keeping the right to Qingqiu is a scourge. As long as you have done some things, you will definitely not be able to keep the fire out of paper. Situ Mengjing said, I'm looking for evidence, but it's not very effective. In fact, as early as a year ago, he had already rushed to the realm of Xiaolongqiu, relying on the cultivation of the immortal. He was in a realm of no one here, even if it was Huang Ting's questioning sword. Situ Mengjing did not stop him. If it wasn't because of Lin Huizi's mentor, it wasn't his Situ Mengjing who came here to look for clues, but the lawyer-in-charge brother was here. However, it is a bit embarrassing to resort to vicious methods similar to stubbornness and memory checking. Once Monk Delankyu is not proficient in this way, it is difficult to guarantee that it will not harm the fundamentals of the Tao. Once wronged and misunderstood, No said that Quan Kinkia's parents would make trouble in Delankyu Patriarch's Hall. Putting himself in the place, Situ Mengjing might also hate Shangzong for it. Furthermore, there are very few people in Delankyu Patriarch Hall who have different opinions on this. Some people are lucky. Since Xiaolongqiu has not done any dirty work on the table and has not really harmed the mountains and rivers of Tonggishao, then why bother to excite the people? The old saying is that there is no filial son in a poor family, and there is no perfect person in the age of the heart. The suzerain is in a dilemma. But Situ Mengjing and the lawyer-in-charge both wanted to dig into the roots. Huang Ting asked, what if I find evidence? Situ Mengjing said indifferently, I will clean the door myself, and I will also take the initiative to report to the academy and submit it to the Confucian temple for recording. Huang Ting was a little surprised. Situ Mengjing said suddenly, I'm afraid Lin Huizhi is as confused as I am afraid. If Quan Qingqiu really colluded with the barbaric army, it would be a pity to die. But if it was Lin Huizhi, Situ Mengjing would be very sad. Huang Ting was stunned and surprised. He really didn't expect that Lin Huizhi might be secretly colluding with the barbaric army account. They said that the ugliness of the family should not be exposed. This Delankyu patriarch is quite unconventional. For a while, her impression of that Delongqiu improved a bit. It stands to reason that the great dragon Qiu of the Middle-earth, the mirror workers came out in large numbers, and monopolized the business. There is almost no such sect that is not full of bronze stinks. Situ Mengjing rarely smiled, and looked at this young female crown who is not high in realm for the time being, but has a lot of fame. Being a monk and being a suzerain are two different things. That's why he refused to succeed Delankyi's mountain lord. In front of Huang Ting, if nothing else, she would soon be the new sovereign of Taiping Mountain. Even if Chen Jianxian arrives at our Delankyu, he is also a first-class guest. Why should he be so sneaky? Situ Mengjing looked strange and sighed, feeling helpless. An illusory figure of the Yin god returned to the real body of the immortal after wandering all over the top of the mountain. In the previous pine needles, there was actually a wind and rain talisman that was hailed from the mountain as listening to the wind is rain. This type of talisman was used to eavesdrop on conversations. Because the spiritual energy dissipates very slowly, it is extremely difficult to find clues. So there is another unpleasant nickname, corner talisman. In addition, the fairy goddess travels far away from the orifice, and there are unexpected gains. For example, on the stone wall of Don't Have the Sky, under the word, there is an imperceptible tiny little letter, and the seal is also a picture. Fu Lu. It was just a trip for the ancient to get out of the body, and he found 5 talismans, like hide and seek, which made an immortal be troubled, and surely there were fish that slipped through the net. Suddenly, Huang Ting squatted down, tilted his head, and took out a talisman from under the stone table with his arms. He is worthy of being Zhong Kuei's friend and a gentleman. Why don't you post a talisman on Situ Mengjing's forehead? No matter how weak the disposition is, the immortal is also a bit annoyed, both annoyed by the other party's unscrupulous means, and surprised at his own unawareness. Situ Mengjing looked around and said loudly, Chen Jianxian, are you such a saint disciple? After Chen Pingon took Xiao Mo and left the Xiande mountain boundary, he traveled all the way to the north of Yufeng, and had to take a trip to Xilongqiu. Xiao Mo suddenly said that he found an immortal not far away. About Mo is an elder on the mountain, guarding two superficial little spirits to travel far away, but for some reason, he did not take the ferry, nor did he sacrifice the talisman. The child is just hiking in the mountains. Chen Pingon was a little curious. Nowadays, in Tonggishao, fairyland monks are not common, like Xiao Longqi's ancestor from the Middle-earth sect, who belongs to Guojianglong. So Xiao Mo Yao remotely used his supernatural powers to watch the mountains and rivers. Without thinking about it, Chen Pingon smiled brightly. It wasn't the immortal who secretly defended the way for the two children, but the descendant of his own family, and an unexpected guest came. Jing Yuqian is currently the only disciple of brother Jun Qian. Chen Pingon immediately rushed to the wind and found two children on the mountain road. Jing Yuqian was also followed by a little girl who carved jade. It is estimated that after taking the intercontinental ferry to Tonggishao, Jing Yugan could only walk here because there was no ferry on Xiande Mountain. Chen Pingon asked Xiao Mo to entertain the immortal. He appeared alone on the mountain road and said with a smile, "Go on again." The little spirit, who had been successfully refining for a few years, saw Chen Pingon, rubbed his eyes, and immediately reverently said with a trembling voice, "Jing Yugan pays homage to the hermit uncle." In fact, Jing Yugan had already met this Uncle Chen. It was the first time the two parties met in the Merit Forest in the Chinese Civil Confucian Temple. Jing Yugan was the first to call the hermit. After Chen Pingon asked him to call the young master uncle, Jing Yugan immediately realized that he used a compromise method to call the hermit young uncle. Hearing this strange and awkward name again, Chen Pingon couldn't help but laugh, and said with a warm smile, "Go on, next time you just call the little uncle." Zheng was really afraid of himself. He had heard brother Junqian say the reason before, and he blamed the messy rumors and newspapers in the wild world. It turned out that the little guy was born in the blessed land of Yuhua in Tonggishao. Due to fate, he and his brother Junqian became a teacher, and he formally entered the Taoist line of Wenxing. Later, he traveled through the wild world with brother Junqian. Along the way, Jing Yugan heard some smog, to put it simply, in the impression of Jing Yuqian at the time, that unmasked little uncle, the terrifying degree, is not equal to the Qi Shanglu of the Great Wall of Jinqi plus a meter to stop the waste. It seems to see with the monks of the monster race and the belonging of the spirits, never talk nonsense. When you meet, you have to twist your head, cramp and peel. Only when the hermit guarded the Great Wall of Sword Qi alone, he once raised his hand and grabbed one. A Yupu realm demon monk who dared to fight the wind across the city's head fiercely pressed him on the city's head, tore off the demon clan's arm with one hand, and then stepped on his waist with one foot. In the end, he was swallowed alive on the spot. Next, just eat so much. So for Jing Yuqian, who is born of a spirit, can you not be afraid? This nephew, of course, misunderstood his little uncle. Seeing Jing Yuqian, if Chen Pingon at this moment fell into the eyes of others, the breath of the whole person would be very different from usual, and no matter the look in his eyes or his face, he would be different from Pei Qian and Chao Sunny. At this moment, Chen Pingon is like putting several talismans on his forehead, and writing a series of texts, kind, I am a little uncle, brother Junqian picked a good disciple, this teacher nephew, it's really pleasing to the eye, fuck it again, is there anyone bullying you? Let's talk to the little uncle has nothing to do anyway, and helps you make sense. There are hundreds and thousands of cults under the heavens and monks, but don't compete with Wenxing's line to protect the calf's high and low level of Taoism. Jing Yugan raised his head and glanced at the little uncle. This little uncle's smile was so exaggerated that Jing Yugan almost cried. I followed master before and met the little uncle who is famous in the wild world. Finally, I was not so scared. This time I returned to my hometown of Tongisao. As a result, I saw another landscape on the White Island Intercontinental Ferry. Di Bao, it turned out that just a few days after the little uncle left the Confucian temple, he made a series of terrifying feats. Leading 4 great sword immortals, went deep into the barren world, wiped out barbaric sects, swept away ancient battlefield ruins, and punched. Broken immortal hairpin city, dragged a toe-down river with the throne demon Fei Fei, the sword cuts to the Yuashan mountain, and the last hermit city is engraved. The content on the Di Bao made the little spirit both happy and proud. If you can't wait to see someone, you will say that I am the master nephew of the hermit. It's just that Jing Yugan will inevitably be a little worried. Alas, to be honest, even though the junior uncle is on his side, he is still very approachable, but it seems that he is still the uncle's wa, so he is less afraid. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "This one is?" Jing Yugan hurriedly introduced, "Master left me in Taishishan before. She is a friend I met on the mountain, whose surname is Tan. Ingzhou, can I tell your name to the hermit teacher?" As soon as he said it, Jing Yugan, who was already nervous, became more and more at a loss. The little girl named Tan Ingzhou hummed softly, her voice as thin as a mosquito and fly. Chen Pingan nodded and smiled. "Hello Tan Ingzhou, my name is Chen Pingan, and am a little uncle who is doing it again." The little girl looked dumb, a little dazed, she nodded stiffly. She is a disciple of Guo Uding, the Ascended Realm great monk from Tai Shushan. She is very young and has a high seniority. Because many of Guo Uding's 6 direct disciples are disciples and grandchildren, this little girl is often called the Taishang Patriarch by the gray-haired monks in the mountains. Baidi City and Taishu Mountain are both unique Songmen mountain tops in the vast world. In the eyes of a gas trainer who is outside of the evil spirits, he looks like a god. A holy land in the eyes of the native monster monk in Haoran. Guo Outing's road number was Yuming, so it was hailed as the Master of Yuming Taoist by the monks of the demon tribe. He is one of the 10 people in Shenzhou of China. According to legend, he had a feat of cutting Huangquan Road with a slash. It is rumored that it was Guo Outing and the last generation of Longhushan Great Heavenly Master. They had a fight on the top of the mountain, shattering the entire Taishu mountain, and the landscape was extremely difficult to stitch. Only afterwards, the iron tree in the mountain will not bloom for thousands of years, one said. The Dragon Tiger Mountain Heavenly Master's mansion, the official post went down the mountain to kill demons, and Guo Ting was originally a monk of the demons, and the hidden murderer killed by Bai Yi left the sea island in the past, is a generation of cultivation. Scholars, so it is indeed reasonable that Guo Outing and the great heavenly master Longhushan did not deal with each other. Actually not. The person who asked Guo Outing for the sword was Qin Qinglu, the one who cut the dragon, and he almost hacked Guo Outing to death. The new Taishu mountain was actually piled up by the broken mountain range, so it was hundreds of feet shorter than the old one. According to the agreement, Guo Outing, who was the defeated party, would not bloom for a day as long as the Taishu mountain was on top of Zongmenza mountain. Guo Outing could not leave the sect for one day. The most excessive thing is that in Taishu mountain, no vegetation or flowers are allowed to be planted. As the sovereign of Taishu mountain, Guo Ting, a monk at the top of the mountain, once used a secret method to manifest the avenue with his own heart and let Taishu mountain flower. But before Guo Ting came down the mountain, someone just happened to climb the mountain. Up. It seems to have been waiting for Guo Outing to let the iron tree bloom. The climber is not the one who slashes the dragon, but his apprentice, the lord of Baidi City, Jingzhuzhong. After that, Guo Outing stayed in the mountains to practice. Only a handful of mountain monks would know such old stories of old people with a long history. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Go on again, little master still has something to do. I will ask a monk named Xiao Mo to take you to Xiandu Mountain." Zheng Yugan nodded vigorously and said, "Little master uncle will be busy first." Chen Pingon said, "Walk with you down the mountain, it won't be too late for the little uncle to leave." The little girl wiped the sweat off her face indiscriminately. She was actually more nervous than Zheng Yugan. Zheng Yugan didn't directly comfort the little girl around him, but he courageously said to the little uncle, "Tan Ningzhou can admire the little uncle, and she has read it more often than me on the newspapers on the mountain. It was the Dibao I bought with my money, but the Dibao belongs to her." In fact, Tan Ningzhou is generally not like this, and it can be noisy at ordinary times. It is said that there are tens of thousands of heroes in the world, and only the little uncle is this. Jing Yuqian stretched out his thumb. The little girl became angry from embarrassment, but the hidden official was present, her face flushed and nervous, her hands clenched tightly at the corners of her clothes. Chen Pingon held sleeves with both hands, bent over slightly, smiled and nodded to the little girl, "Thank you for your approval." Chen Pingon stretched out his sleeves again and smiled, "The vision is very good." The little girl smiled shyly. The guardian of the two children appeared together with Xiao Mo in the yellow hat and blue shoes. He is slender, dressed in a robe of thick ink color, with a wooden hairpin on his head, and has a handsome appearance. Responsible for secretly escorting Tan Ningzhou and Jing Yuqian to travel across continents. Jing Yugan looked dull. The little girl was calm and gentle, obviously she had guessed it a long time ago. The Aquarius Island who went to Luopa Mountain first, learned of the next incident, and rushed to Tongya Island again. This boy is Tan Yingzhi's preaching teacher and Gua Outing's close disciple. The monk actually made a polite gift, smiling and saying to Chen Pingon with a gentle smile, "Father Taishishin, indeed, I have seen Mr. Qin." Chen Pingon smiled and clasped his fists in return, "I have seen Senior Longmen." The monk in front of him, when he was young, once had a deed of hitting the Dragon's Gate by hitting water for thousands of miles. Sure enough, the name Dragon Gate was a bit unexpected. This young hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi had actually heard of himself. Otherwise, why would you even say your own road number in one go? He is almost the same as the master, he likes to stay in the mountains, just to practice. When I was young, I didn't like to travel down the mountain, and I didn't like to discuss the Taoism with others. If you lose, you will be injured, and you will be angry and enmity. If you break yourself, you will lose even more. Even if you win, you want. An extra snowflake money, fame are like clouds and clouds, and they can't be eaten. Therefore, in the Middle-earth Shenzhou, his reputation is far less than that of the senior brothers and sisters. Because the respected master was subject to that promise in his early years, he must not leave the Taishu mountain boundary. Therefore, the senior brothers and sisters are outside the relationship, accumulating the incense of the mountain, and talking with the outside world. Buy and sell business. Even the monks outside Taishu mountain now mistakenly thought that he was still a nascent soul monk. In that battle, he just kept his name incognito, took a trip to Nanpa Suzhou, and deliberately hid his realm, but he hid among a group of monks and placed himself on a coastal front with the Jindan monks. In the end, when the battle was at stake, they joined forces with the sword fairy Chao Shi to defend the Zhenhai Tower together. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Senior Longman has worked so hard to him all the way." Sure enough, he smiled and said, "Mr. Chen is welcome to take things for granted." Chen Pingon patted his nephew on the shoulder, with a look of admiration on his face. "Yes, we can, among our disciples of Wensheng's lineage and reposting, who finally resembles himself. If you look at the old at the age of 3, you will never be a bachelor when you see that your teacher nephew Zheng is doing the little girl's side. Some things have nothing to do with learning and realm. I really need to talk about talent." Jing Yugan suddenly asked in a low voice, "Little master, who are you going to chop off this trip?" In the eyes of the little spirit, the little uncle who he most respects is either carrying a sword and cutting people, or walking on the road of carrying a sword and cutting people. Chen Pingan wanted to explain to Jing Yugan that your little uncle, in fact, has always been kind to others, and everyone knows that. It just happened to rely on a wind and rain talisman to hear the question of the fairy Xiao Longqiu, and Chen Pingan smiled and said, "It's a fairy." Sword of Coming Chapter 904. On Xiaolankyozu Mountain, the Dragon Vein Ridge looks like a handful of wishful thinking. Gu Panasonic, Sita Mengjing seemed to conclude that Chen Pingan would come here, and began to close his eyes to rest, and patiently waited for the young hermit's visitor, Xiao Longqiu. Huang Ting was a little boring, so he called Linghu Banana Fish to come here to accompany him and chatter, but there was Longbeard Xianjun, Grand Profound Master Uncle Grandmaster, present. How dare the girl make any trouble? No matter what Huang Ting asked, she just nodded or shook her head. Never dared to disturb the ancestors' cleansing. As a monk going down the mountain, he is of course familiar with and talked about all kinds of anecdotes and fairy tales about his ancestor Delongqiu. There are endless stories about the story of the Dragon-Beard Immortal. He is a good friend with Zhou Shenji, one of the 10 Chinese people in the past. He has participated in the banquet of Qingshan Mountain in Zhuhai Dongtian, one of the most beautiful places in the world. The of Life, the flower god, is his confidant. He travels upside down the mountain and has a good talk with the Taoist Gaoxian who holds the dragon beard, and his master is by Yujingzhen Invincible. Staying in the Shuijing Palace, one of the 4 private residences on the Downfall Mountain, it is rumored that the Yunxian fairy of Yulongzong is quite close. The ascendant monk from Iazhao who was called the Master of 37 Peaks was even a year-long friendship. At the beginning of the practice, the realm of the 2 sides was very different, so they were nicknamed Little Friends of Dragon Beard by the old gods. Until Sita Mengjing circulated aura, opened his eyes after a small week, looked at the girl kindly, and proactively said, blowing the heat, "Are you willing to follow me to Delongqiu, my senior brother Xuanzhong? I plan to do so in the near future. Accepting disciples, if you are willing, I can help introduce them." The monk's mountain road name is like a small print, so called by the elders. Of course it is a kind of recognition and closeness. Linghu Banana Fish quickly got up. Of course, the girl didn't want to go to Delongqiu, but she didn't dare to tell the truth, so she was a little embarrassed. Sita Mengjing smiled and stretched out his hand and pressed twice. "Don't be nervous, don't go if you don't want to go. Someday in the future, if you want to travel to the Middle-earth Divine Continent, you can fly a sword to send a letter to the Daolongqiu Yunxiu Mansion in advance." Yunxiu Mansion is the dojo in the mountains of the Dragon-Beard Immortal Monarch. On the girl, someone's shadow was vaguely visible, which was specious. Linghu Banana Fish hurriedly thanked the chief. The Middle-earth Immortal suddenly stood up and said, "Father Delongqiu, Sita Mengjing, has seen Lord Qin Shan." A green-shirted swordsman floated down by the cliff, smiling and saying, "Luopashan Chen Pingan, I've seen Dragonbeard Immortal." Behind him was a follower with a yellow hat and blue shoes, lightly tapping the green bamboo stick in his hand. It was not long ago that Sita Mengjing received a Shanshui Mansion report from Delongqiu, from Shanhaizong. Tongyi's Hao is too closed. In the past, his eyes were higher than the top, and he felt that there were no continents outside of the divine continent of the Middle Earth. Seeing the content on the Dibao made an immortal feel unbelievable and could not believe it. Linghu Banana Fish stood up with the ancestor, a little confused, and fell in love with the mountain. Lord Qin Shan. How come I have never seen or heard of it before? Mostly because I am ignorant and ignorant. A stone table, 4 stools. Long-bearded immortal monarch, Huang Ting's sister, who is temporarily the host, plus 2 guests. Linghu Banana Fish was about to move, giving the position to the entourage of Lord Qin Shan. I saw a young man holding a green bamboo staff standing behind the Qing Shan Dao in a long coat and cloth shoes. At this moment, he smiled at her and said, "Miss Linghu is just sitting down." Situ Mengjing stretched out a palm to Chen Pingan, and put one hand on his sleeve. "Please sit down." After Chen Pingan took his seat, he smiled and asked, "I don't know if Dragon Beard Immortal is looking for me, what's the order?" Situ Mengjing looked like a smile but not a smile, and he deserves to be said to be the scholar who is said to be the most like an old scholar in the literary line. His face is not thin. This Middle-earth immortal, with a clean face and a beautiful beard, seemed to be a poor man living in seclusion in the mountains and forests. Delankyu is in the Middle-earth Shenzhou. Even if he has two immortals sitting on the mountain, he is making money every day, and his family is deep, but he still belongs to the second-rate sect. It is derived from the vast territory of the Middle-earth Shenzhou, beyond imagination, and the other age Zhou, a sect, can own an immortal. It is already a well-deserved top sect fairy house, but in the Middle-earth Shenzhou, whether the second loose sect can be in the first line, there is an insurmountable sky moat. In the mountains is there any ascension? Situ Mengjing did not want to go in circles with each other, and said straightforwardly, "I believe that Lord Qin Shan is already very familiar with our Xilankyu. What I said earlier with Huang Ting is even more sincere. I dare to ask Lord Qin Shan how to teach." However, Chen Pingan answered the wrong question. "If you remember correctly, you Delankyu in the earth, plus this downhill, there has been no new jade in more than 200 years. Now there is only one monk in the Yupu realm of Delankyu, and that is the Delankyu Zhonglu with the name of the Hanging Bell, the master and the junior of Situ Mengjing. In addition, they are all old-aged infants, such as Lin Huizhi who went down the mountain. Quan Qingqiu is still a little better, and with good aptitude, he is expected to be among the 5 realms. I believe this is also the embarrassment for the great Longqiu and the Patriarch Hole. With Situ Mengjing's temperament, it is certain that he would not be the supreme master, and the violent temper of the Hanging Bell is natural, and it is not suitable to succeed the suzerain. So once the sovereign lord dies, which day the soldiers will be disbanded, and Delankyu will continue to inherit the incense for 3,000 years, what should I do? Where is a monk? How to gain a foothold in Middle-earth? Can't let a cultivator of nascent soul realm be the sovereign. Isn't it the great jealousy of slighting the world? Situ Mengjing nodded. Anyone who has no farsightedness must have near worries. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Fortunately, no matter how green and yellow, as long as the dragon-beard immortal monarch is present, it will be better than those immortal palaces that have been removed from the sect. At most, they are a little bit frustrated and will be laughed at by the outside world." Zongmin Taoism inheritance year and month are divided into 1-year-old and imaginary years, depending on whether there is a jade realm. On the Confucian temple, a 300-year period will be given. If a sect has no Yupu within 300 years, the title of sect will be removed as per the rule. It's just that even if Delankyi's old sect master has solved it, there is Situ Mengjing, a young immortal, and that junior brother Hanging Bell. How can they not be reduced to the level of calculating, imaginary age? In fact, Linghu Banana Fish has been listening with upright ears, seeming to be sitting right upright, without squinting. In fact, she took the courage and secretly glanced at the Qing Shan guest next to her from the corner of her eye. This young mountain lord, with a smile, plus the last sentence, "I was jokes by the outside world," it was really not beating. Huang Ting looked at the guy who was sitting with his legs up, with a relaxed and calm mind. She sighed with emotion. If she said she had a good fate, this guy would have a hard life. Back then, Chen Pingan was in the Lotus Root's blessed land, in fact, at such a level, but he was able to break out of the siege on his own. Don't talk about the invincible Ding Ying, just talk about Zhou Fei, Lu Feng, which is the fuel-efficient lamp. In fact, Huang Ting secretly traveled to Feixingcheng in the colorful world, where the sword repair was on the wine table. As long as the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi was mentioned, he would have a clear attitude, and there would be no such thing as "don't care" in the middle. Chen Pingan looked at the chess game on the table and said casually, "So if Dragon Beard Xianjun really wants to clean up the door and remove the two Dragon Chou's nascent soul realm all at once, it's really too bad for his vitality. The enemy is quick. If one is not careful, it will even cause the sect to lose this enclave of other continents. I believe this is also the reason why the Dragon Beard Immortal has not done anything improperly. The Lord of the Delankyu Mountain, he has already felt guilty for the ancestors of the past now. If you destroy the foundation of the mountain with your own hands, whoever changes it will have to worry about it." Situ Mengjing was silent. Chen Pingan raised his sleeves, put out his hand, twisted his fingers in the shape of a piece, and a black chess piece appeared out of thin air at his fingertips. The piece was lightly placed on the chessboard. In an instant, there were signs of windswept clouds on the chessboard, and the weather was ups and downs. All the chess pieces before the implication trembled together, like a small world, with a dragon walking through the water, turning the river and the sea to the sea. Change another hand, hold a snow-white chess piece with 2 fingers, and set it on the chessboard again, and the previous chaos is eliminated in an instant. All the chess pieces stabilized, as if they had returned to the sky. Chen Pingan said to himself, "Good words always make people feel uncomfortable, and it is often not the truth to listen to the light-hearted truth." In Gongdalan, Chen Pingan turned the book frequently. Besides, there is also Mr. Shiping, who has the most miscellaneous knowledge in the world, so you can ask whatever you want. Therefore, he knows Yuguizong, Tonggizong, Wanyazong of Sanshan Blessed Land, and Delankyu, who went up the mountain as Xialankyu. In many Delankyu patriarch halls, there are relatively young worshippers, secrets of the sect that they don't know, and the many merits and demerits of the ancestors of the past that should not be promoted. Chen Pingan is clear. Situ Mengjing lowered his head and squinted his eyes, staring at the chess game on the table, and slowly said, "A good chess game, even if Master and Han Jiangshu are present, they will have no solution to the next game." Situ Mengjing raised his head and said with a smile, "Chen Shanzhu is worthy of being Cui Guoxi's younger brother, and he is also proficient in playing chess. The stars in life are worth their money. I am born in heaven, am I in Chainan? The moon star is rare tonight." After the young sword fairy settled down, the fairy Situ Mengjing had only exhausted his eyesight, and could only vaguely see 2 slender starlights. If he received an edict, he would be attracted to him. Landed from the sky, and finally landed on the chessboard. This means that Chen Pingan's 2 hands of exquisite placement not only fit the avenues of will, but also smoothly. It completely defeated the entire endgame before. Xiao Emo stood behind his son, expressionless. In fact, one day at Misufeng, after Sect Master Cui learned that there was such a chess game, he took out 2 pots of chess pieces and asked her husband to help compose the game record. As a result, Sect Master Cui glanced at the endgame and put away all black and white on the table. The pawns were relayed one by one. During the period, they kept picking up black and white pawns. It was like witnessing the Panasonic game between 2 fairies. Sect Master Cui scolded the 2 idiots while he was playing. Ashamed, laughed generously. Finally, he helped Chen Pings play the 2 moves that Chen Pingan made today. Situ Mengjing asked doubtfully, "Shanzhu Chen is still a man of high spirits?" Jian Xiu, pure Wu Fu, Fu Lu monk. Chen Pingan smiled and asked, "Is it possible?" Situ Mengjing sighed and asked straightforwardly, "How do you determine the betrayal of Lin Huizhi and Quan Qingqiu?" Linghu Banana Fish instantly paled. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Then I'm just talking nonsense." Situ Mengjing smiled and said, "Then I will just listen to it." Chen Pingan stood up, looked at the wild garden carefully built by Quan Qingqiu in the distance, and whispered, "Long-bearded fairy will soon know the answer." Situ Mengjing said suddenly, "Remind Chen Shanzhu in advance that how to deal with rebellion in the end is to kill or not. The Longqiu does not need outsiders to intervene." The last time Chen Pingan visited the tip of the heart, he reunited with Huang Ting of Taiping Mountain. After spending a while at the hut, Situ Mengjing noticed a killing intent. It was like a straight line and a sword light passing over Xilongqiu. It was actually able to make Situ Mengjing feel the coldness of Dao Axan for a moment. Chen Pingan turned his head and smiled and looked at Situ Mengjing, without saying anything. Xiao Amo smiled and said, "Since you Longqiu don't know how to do things well, don't teach my son how to do things." Chen Pingan said, "I can't say that. It is Longqiu's housework. As outsiders, we are very honored to be able to help a little bit." Xiao Mo nodded and said, "The son is right." Situ Mengjing didn't feel the slightest ridiculous. He was heavy, and slowly got up and said, "If we can help us solve this huge hidden danger, Longqiu will have a good return." Chen Pingan moved to the edge of the cliff, stretched out a hand, held the palm of one of the two stacked narrow knives around his waist, and faced the wild garden that was not far away. The mountain breeze gently blew the hair on the temples, and Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Everything is easy to talk, but all are easy to talk. In today's Howren world, except for a handful of people, they may not know a truth." Chen Pingan, the Lord of the Fallen Mountain. Xiamo, Luopa Mountain is dedicated to the sword repairs at the pinnacle of the Ascension realm. The chief worships Jiang Shangzhen, an immortal. Sect Master Cui Dongshan, immortal. Luopa Mountain Palm has a long life and can be regarded as an immortal. A certain handyman disciple at the New Year's shop in Qilong Lane transformed into an outer demon and ascended to the realm. The chief consecration of the next sect, Miyu, is a sword repairer in the Yupu realm. Zhu Lian, the steward of Luopa Mountain, is a perfect martial artist at the top of the mountain. Pei Qian, the great disciple of the mountain, is the end of the martial arts. It seems that the Qi practitioner is under the Yupu realm, the pure Wufu is under the mountain realm, and the famous guest clerk of the upper and lower sects. It seems that there is no need to talk about it. Outside of Middle-earth Shenzhou, Jingguang teamed up with Fist Gang, which was enough to sweep half of the continent. Just like in the old days of the Dali dynasty, one country was one continent. Now Chen Pingan, it seems that one person is half a continent. Chen Pingan said, "I'm troubled by Longan Xianjun to call Quan Qingqiu and Chief Zhang for help." Quan Qingqiu and Zhang Luzhu soon each came in a hurry. Quan Qingqiu didn't know the green-shirt swordsman who looked at the shelf. But when Chief Zhang saw the back of the green shirt, his scalp was numb, and his Taoist heart swayed like a bucket. Chen Pingan turned his head and smiled, "Chief Zhang, long time no see." Zhang Luzu's expression was tense, he couldn't help swallowing, not knowing how to answer. In fact, it hasn't been a long time. It took only a few days to leave the Tapingshan site. Earlier, the old Yuanying and the Neiyu dynasty's insider worship, the Golden Core monk Daiyuan, is really blessed and enjoys the same difficulties. The mirrored flowers and the moon, the wine, the Daiyuan, the realm is not high, and the person has a good personality. Can call a group of graceful and beautiful fairies, from their own sects and from other hills. They took a mouthful of Zhang eldest brother and Zhang Shangxian, shouting that the bones of the old Yuanying would be crisp. It is not that they have not seen such a powder formation, but a group of Yingying and Yanyan are all genealogical sisters, never before. Only in the end they became a pair of difficult brothers and sisters, and they were all imprisoned by the cruel sword fairy in Qingshan with vicious secret methods. In the end, Zhang Luzhu and Daiyuan were at the foot of the Tapingshan site together, as if they were two. The door god, how it was like during the period, was really miserable, I didn't want to think about it. So that after returning to Xylonkyu alive, and then becoming the chief guest, everyone had some smiles, because the old Yuaning reminded himself every day to cherish the present day of the gods. At that time, at the door, Zhang Luzhu was taken away by Jiang Shangzhen from the black stone of unknown material, so that he was considered to have lost his fortune and eliminated the calamity, and he barely sent away the two plague gods. By now, the old Yuaning, who was born in Yishou, didn't know that the inconspicuous stone he occasionally got back then was actually one of the ancient Lian Dui. If you know the roots of this thing, you can sell at least 300 grains of rain money if you meet someone who knows the goods in the Middle-earth divine continent. It's a pity that for many years, Zhang Luzhu has only taken a look at the whole continent, violent and violent. Chen Pingan shifted his gaze, looked at the young Yuaning with a fishing rod hanging from his waist, and asked with a smile, "Your name is Quan Qingqiu?" "The last name is good, the name is better." Quan Qingqiu glanced at Patriarch Master, and didn't mean to mention anything, so he cautiously said, "It's Quan Qingqiu, I don't know what senior is." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "A foreigner, you don't know if you say it. I once met a monk with the same name as you. I met with each other as soon as I saw it through a fence. That fellow Qingqiu is like you. Chopsticks can't drink soup, spoon can't eat noodles, each has its own strengths and weaknesses. In the prison of the old deaf child, a fairyland great demon called Qingqiu was once imprisoned. He was really a blue loach, one of the four evils that dragged down the river." Quan Qingqiu was confused when he heard that, a foreigner, dared to play mystery here in front of the master. What on earth does he want to do? Chen Pingan asked, "The wild garden, apart from those who have not yet been successfully refined, have you checked the identities of the 76 monster monks? A wild garden occupies an area of tens of miles, and all those monster races are banned, almost all of them are monks in the lower 5 realms. The chief guest, Zhang Lu, focuses on the overall situation of the abbot, but the person who is really in charge of the specific affairs is the old golden pill of Xylonkyu, and another guest who has been recruited a few years ago. He is a pure martial artist, born in a subjugated military commander, in a state of gold, and his family broken. There is no hope of restoring the country, facing the remnants of these monster races, killing intent. Monk Xylonkyu meticulously built a talisman formation and set up a landscape barrier to prevent the monks from escaping from the rune formation. Above the line of the rune formation, dozens of mirrors made by Xylonkyu mirror were hung in the wild garden. In the middle area, there is a small hill with a wide view. There is a temporary mansion built on the top of the hill. The Wufu named Qingmi lives in it. Quan Qingqiu and Zhang Luzhu occasionally settle in it. Tourists from other countries can take a few talisman boats to tour the wild garden. Quan Qingqiu couldn't help but glanced at Uncle Shi again, but unfortunately Situ Mengjing still didn't have any reminders. Quan Qingqiu felt a little anger in his heart. Listening to the tone of the squad, does he really feel that he has taken possession of the magpie's nest and turned against the guest? However, Quan Qingqiu replied in a calm tone, as much as possible, all of them have been carefully checked, and they have passed the mutual authentication between the monsters and beasts. It is clear which Shantao sect comes from, which wild military account belongs to, and is recorded in detail. There won't be any mistakes. I took this opportunity to help the Academy find a lot of hidden news. There is only one Dragon Gate realm and a few Dongfu realm beasts, what can be wrong? Quan Qingqiu can kill all the monster races in the wild garden with one hand as long as he wants to. Chen Pingan stepped out, shrank the mountains and rivers, and came directly to the sky above the wild garden. In the bright moon night, a green shirt hovered in the wind, gently tapping the handle of the narrow sword with the palm of his hand, his eyes drooping, overlooking the earth. Xiao Mo did not follow Chen Pingan to the wild garden, but was told by his heart to stand on the edge of the cliff, looking at his son's demeanor. Xiao Mo was looking forward to traveling together with his son in the bright moon in the future. In the ancient times when the high ground was far and wide, there were countless strange sights, such as the golden crow of the Sun Palace descending from the crimson quell, and the emperor riding the wind under the green. They were all scenes that Xiao Mo had seen with his own eyes. There was even that magnificent battle between water and fire. The bright moon melted, the mountains collapsed, the Dada dried up, the sea began to burn, and the scorching sun began to freeze. There is no need to hold the token of the talisman formation. The green shirt is straight, and the formation restriction is broken at will, such as entering the land of no one, and falling on the square outside the mountain-top mansion. Zhang Luzhu hesitated for a moment, and said to Xianjun Longbeard that he obtained permission and immediately went to the Yeyuan mansion with Yu Feng. One is walking in the square. The burly man stopped his figure, his face was unhappy, and he asked in a deep voice, "Who is the one here? Give your name." The uninvited guest said, "The last name is Chen, the first name is Ping'an. From Xiande Mountain, see General Ching Ching." Takeo glanced at the opponent's waist with a knife, stretched his brows a little, and slowed down his tone, and asked, "Is there a token of Xiaolonqiu?" Zhang Luzhu came to the square and said anxiously, "Qing Mi, don't be rude to Qin Shanzhu. Qin Shanzhu is our Xiaolonqi's distinguished guest." Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Why is it rude to check the identity?" "Chief Zhang, we are friends. I still have to say you can't turn your elbows outside." Zhang Luzhu immediately bent over and nodded. Manager Qin Shan's teachings must be remembered in mind. Lao Tzu was born in Yishou, so what is shameless and shameless to talk to me? Who is it? Ching Mi is used to this. He doesn't like or dislike this old daffodil named Narcissus. Anyway, it's just a short man who pulls out a general. In this Xiaolonqiu, he can still drink and talk a few words. Ching Mi and Lin Huizhi, the Frosty Mountain owner, and the dog seeing Quan Qingqiu, had nothing to talk about. It is estimated that the other party would not bother to talk to him, in a sparsely physique golden body, on the mountain again not worth a few gods' money. Chen Pingan slowly drew the knife out of its sheath. A narrow knife slashed, and the sharp blade appeared. It is as cool as water, and the moonlight is shining, very clear. Wearing a blue shirt, after pulling the knife out of the sheath, the waist did not straighten up, but slightly buckled. An unusually vast and thick breath instantly enveloped the entire wild landscape. Such as Heaven Landing. Those monster races that have not yet succeeded in refining, as if they had seen the initial existence of their own bloodlines, recognized their ancestors and returned to their ancestors, all of them involuntarily crawled on the ground and trembled. But the monster monks in the wild garden, even if they didn't recognize the blue shirt, they recognized the famous narrow sword that had long been famous for all the military tents in the wilderness. It's the one in the Great Wall of Jinchi, abnormal existence. His face and figure were all blurred, standing alone at the top of the city with a knife. It was just a bright red robe, turned into a blue shirt. Chen Pingan narrowed his eyes and looked around. "I found you. I really know how to hide. Choosing to hide here is really good for my brain. Otherwise, just relying on his own few wind and rain charms, really may not be able to find clues. It's a pity that there is a Xiaomo beside him." Offering a handful of caged finches. Chen Pingan stepped out again, holding down the head of the lower 5-level monster monk with one hand, wiping it across with a narrow knife, and slowly cutting off the head. At the same time, he had detained this soul into a ball, held it in the palm of his hand, and threw it to Xiao Mo who was standing on the cliff of his mind. Xiao Mo put it in a natal flying sword, and after a while, he had a heartfelt talk with his son. In addition to Quan Qingqiu, there really is another Lin Huizhi. This monster monk is not high in realm, just a nascent infant realm, but it is one of the relatively core roles of a certain wild military account, and it has a good teacher. It was damaged in a battle in the old dragon city, its true body was broken, and it returned to the vicinity of Xylonkyu to recuperate, and finally failed to withdraw from Tongisao in time. Even though all the monster races that are still wild and untamable are imprisoned here, none of them dared to approach the last hermit who had guarded half of the Great Wall of Sword Chi with an invincible posture tonight. After all, the only person who confronted him in those years was the Sword Fairy Dragon Lord, one of the old thrones. Chen Pingon returned his sword and returned to the square outside the hilltop mansion, and asked with a smile, "General Qing, would you like to move a place? There are a lot of martial artists on the top of my house, and there is no shortage of opportunities to learn from each other. Xiaolong owes me a favor. It won't be blocked." Chengmi grinned and shook his head. "It's nice to be here. I don't think I'm still dreaming when I look at the bunch of beasts in the cage every day." Above the Confucian Temple, the Minister of Bones and Knives, standing on the battlefield, is also a general of thighs and arms. He was born in a family of hairpins, but he joined the army when he was young and abandoned his pen to vote for the army. For decades, he has been sluggish and dealt with sand and horse dung. The capital of the old country was once hailed as the city without moon by the immortal master of Izhou. Because since the founding of the country, there has been no curfew. The lights are like daylight all the year round, so it's superfluous to look like a bright moon. If you want to take it away, you can't take it away. If you want to go back, you can't go back home. It's just that besides missing family members and robe, for some reason, what Qingmi missed most now was a fly restaurant in his hometown that he often went to. For a bowl of noodles, drop a handful of minced garlic, sprinkle a handful of dried chilies, and drizzle with hot oil. Chen Pingon smiled and said goodbye. Qingmi clasped his fists heavily and looked solemn. Zhang Luzhu did not immediately follow Chen Pingon to leave the wild garden. "Let me slow down, I have to suppress my shock before I can move." After feeling a little calm, the old Yuaning smiled while stroking his beard. "Qingmi, do you want to know who the other party is?" Qingmi chuckled, and then continued to walk. "CK, the gentleman who can see the gentleman." Zhang Luzhu was crippled with food. Don't think Qingmi was a rough man. In fact, there was a bit of learning and ink in his stomach. Qingmi suddenly stopped and asked, "The previous demonic cultivators seem to be using the same vocabulary in the wild bird language. What does it mean?" Zhang Luzhu ridiculed, "The beast is squeaky, if I understand it. It's weird if I understand it." Chen Pingon returned to Ruyijian Panasonic. Situ Mengjing had already communicated with the cultivator who called himself Xiaomo. A stubborn immortal with a Taoist heart was relieved and inevitably sentimental. Situ Mengjing sighed heavily, straightened his shirt, and said with Chen Pingon, "I thank the hidden official for Delongqiu." After straightening his waist, Situ Mengjing smiled and said, "I have a relative who is relatively distant. After returning to Hauran, he once visited Delongqiu. He highly respected the hidden official. I hope that the hidden official will pass Lixiaozu in the future. Find him for a drink." Chen Pingon smiled without saying anything. Knowing who Situ Mengjing is talking about, he is a sword repairman from a foreigner, Situ Jiu from Lixiaozu, Yupujing. The other party is also a frequent visitor to his own wine shop, and the relationship is very familiar. I drink poorly and the wine is not good. I like to say some drunken things when I drink too much. When I squat on the side of the road and drink vegetables and drink together, I like to hold my shoulders, so I ask if I don't want to be a concubine. Dare not. He also said that in his family, it is a famous beauty den. Arriving in Lixiaozu, looking for him to drink. It would be very polite not to cut his Situ Jiu. Chen Pingon took Xiao Mo directly back to Xiandu Mountain. Previously, Xiao Mo sent them to the Xiandu Mountain boundary, and left, turning into a sword light and flying away. The sword light was fleeting. Sure enough, he is an immortal, and he is practicing in a large gate like Taishishin. Although he does not like to travel far, because the master is controlled by that promise, the big monks take the initiative to visit Taishishin, so he does not need to go out at all. I was accustomed to seeing the demeanor of the monks on the mountain tops of all continents, just like the real fire dragon who claimed to be the world's fire method first, thunder method second, once drunk and drunk once, shook his arm with a rare water magic power. Because Master Guo Uding was defeated in the first question sword, and also lost to the Jinshou Qin who had the flood dragon slaying the flood dragon, so as a close disciple, he knew Jinshou very well. According to legend, in ancient times, sword repair and sword light prospered, and it could be shining with the sun and the moon. Tan Ningzhou asked, "Master, what's wrong?" Sure enough, he smiled and said, "Mr. Xiao Mo, he should be a great sword fairy." Xing Yugong grinned and said, "The hidden official little uncle, there are sword immortals around him, it's not strange at all." Tan Ningzhou had arms around his chest, he smiled and said, "Do you understand again?" Xing Yugong was a little helpless. As soon as her little uncle left, she was just this virtue. On the side of the ferry that was about to be completed, I saw a young man in white who seemed to be an overseer, and a young woman with a slender figure. Xing Yugong shouted, "Brother Cui, senior sister Pei." Although my master is the younger brother's brother, but I was late to start, so it's not wrong to call the other brother and sister. He is not stupid, he is so worldly, and he is very proficient. It is clearly written in black and white on the book. Pei Qian smiled and nodded, "Good name." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Fuck again, see us next time, remember to call Sister Pei first, and then Sister Cui. Anyway, they have to be booked, it is better to do it yourself." Tan Ningzhou curiously asked, "Are you Jing Qian?" Probably because she felt rude, the little girl hurriedly added, "Grandmaster Zhang." Pei Qian smiled and said, "Just call me Sister Pei." Xing Yugong explained to the two fellow students, "On the way here, I just met little Shishu." Xiao Shishu said that he was going to Xiaolongqiu to chop. I asked the sword, "I think I will return soon." Tan Ningzhou stared and said, "How can the hidden official say that, just saying that he is going to be a visitor and friend, so you don't want to add fuel and jealousy here?" Xing sighed again. "The little uncle is my little uncle, not yours. Forget it, it's always right not to quarrel with the girl." The two sword lights left the boundary of Xiaolongqiu and returned south in the middle of the night. The sword light is accompanied by the bright moonlight, several stars fall on their chests, and the sols of 100,000 peaks are blue. Sword of Coming Chapter 905. At the end of the new year, there was another heavy snowfall, with countless pieces of jade. A military ferry of the Daquan dynasty has sailed far from the northern border, and within a few hours, it will reach the Xiandushan ferry. There was an old man wearing an old and heavy fox fur. He traveled north by boat along the way, occasionally leaving the house and walking to the boat rail, watching the winding mountains and rivers in the wind and snow. If you want to experience abundance, you will be swayed by the fairy algae. It's no longer the barren fields and countless dead bones under the mountain, the only bleak scene in the mountains where apes climb the withered vines and cranes look at the tombstones. On the side of the ferry, a green shirt suddenly gathered the clouds and water, hovering in the wind and snow. The green shirt and the long gown, the hostess on the head, the double knives on the waist, the volley and the emptiness, keep pace with the ferry. This blue-shirt swordsman, who appeared next to the ferry without warning, seemed to be strolling in the air, but in fact he was as fast as an eagle. Thousands of horses are imprisoned and angered against all enemies. Lu Zong walked out of the cabin, came to the bow deck, leaned against the railing, smiled and waved, "Brother Qin." The chief worshipper of the Daquanyao family made a gesture to indicate that the worship and the soldiers on the ferry side should not be nervous, they are his own family members. After Chen Pingon settled down on the ferry side, he shouted, "Brother Lu." The short old man grinned with a beard. Hearing Chen Pingan's name, Lu Zong, the knife sharpener, looked quite contented. This is called gathering people in groups. I think back then, he was such a handsome young guy. In that hometown, when I was young, I didn't dare to say that I was invincible, and I was invincible. Anyway, I was invincible and rarely met. As long as the ones who are stronger than yourself don't stand in the way, you are invincible. Countless heroes of the world have met me, Lu Zong. Who doesn't give a thumbs up? How many high-ranking officials, who want to treat themselves as guests, teach how many women are infatuated, and make them repeat the nickname in their hearts. Little Zhu Lian. The ferry was 3 stories high, and Lu Zong took Chen Pingan to the top floor, where old General Yao rested. Chen Pingan asked curiously, "Is this a transcontinental ferry? You Dequan built it yourself?" As for the intercontinental ferry, Chen Pingan dared to say that the number he has seen is not half 140. This ferry is actually only slightly smaller than the Fengyuan ferry. Compared with the ferry boats on all continents that are docked on the inverted mountain, this ferry can be regarded as a medium-sized one. Lu Zong gathered the sound together and revealed the secrets of Chen Pingan. There was no taboo. It is half buying and half made. Back then, many strange people and strangers gathered in Mirage City. About half of them were saved by His Majesty. There are a few immortal genealogists who can have some relationship with other continents. A few years ago, Your Majesty asked people to help build the bridge, and at a high price, he bought some construction drawings from Ia's Hao. The Wusunlan ferry boat, I heard about it. Generally, the cross-continental dock is at the southernmost Kashandu, Daejian. Xian Suli is responsible for the lead. This one is the same as Wusunlan, but the appearance has been changed a lot. Your Majesty is very courageous. In addition to this Luxianzi, he also has to build 2 new intercontinental ferry boats. Keep one for yourself and sell one. Anyway, the money you bought for the drawings must be made up from someone who is wronged. When I came back, the names were taken, and they were called Amayu and Lei Che. Han Yushu, the daughter of Wanyeazong's suzerain, said that they intend to buy Sanshan blessed land, but for some reason there has been no news recently. There are also some intentions on the Jinding Temple in the north, but the price is not as high as that given by Wanyaozong. A full 30% lower, but the Baotian Taoist Yi Miaofeng of Jindingwen, and his disciple Xiao Yuanran, were the first-class offerings of our Dequan before. If this incense is there, if Wanyaozong delays this way, he won't give it to him. For proper reasons, with Your Majesty's temper, most of them sold that thunder car to Jindingwen. Chen Pingan deliberately skipped Wanyaozong, thought about it, nodded and said, "It's safe for Dequan to keep 2 ferry boats on his own. One is for north-south trade, connecting Aquarius and Beiju Luzhou in the north. If you can also sail to the northern ice field of Aizhou. For example, you Dequan can see if there is a chance to join forces with the Lu family of Aizhou to mine ice field minerals. Another ferry is to go to Shenzhou or Fuyao Island. Yes, and the sooner you have a private ferry, the better. You can finalize the terms of the covenant with the sects and big dynasties along the route as soon as possible. The longer the period, the better. Now, 7 or 8 out of 10 of the existing intercontinental ferry boats of the Haoran Tianxia Zongmen have been transferred and borrowed by the Zhongta Confucian Temple. They have been temporarily confiscated. Therefore, there are few ferries that can cross the land and cross the sea. Therefore, whoever can own a similar ferry, earning money is easier than ever, similar to the strong chess on the Go board, the most powerful, and then take the ground. Lu Zong chuckled and said, "The hero sees a little the same, my brother can help convey this to our Majesty." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Brother Lu, it's been so many years. he's still in a golden figure. It's not appropriate. When we arrive at Xiande Mountain, let's help each other. Knowing that the other party was changing the subject, Lu Zongming still laughed angrily. Swearing does not reveal the shortcomings, hitting people without slapping the face, and talking about the morals of the world. It is really this brand new leather bag given by the old master of Yu, as the gift of Dengqing head knocking the sky drum. It is so good that Lu Zong has been away from the lotus root for many years, and he has never broken the mirror. Breaking a bottleneck in the golden body is almost as difficult as getting a chi trainer from the Yuaning to the 5 levels, so worrying that Lu Zong has not drunk less boring wine over the years. I heard that Nanyuanguo's cultivator, his mother, is already a bottleneck in the far travel boundary. As for how old brother Qin is around him, and what he can do with this stuff, it's like his younger generation has something to do, and it's too late to be happy. Because on the ferry, there is the old General Yao Jin, and the County King Yao Xianji who served as the capital of the capital, so in addition to the knife sharpener Lu Zong personally responsible for escorting, there are also a number of Earth Immortal training airmen, who dare not take it lightly. As for whether there is a hidden expert, Chen Pingan deliberately does not investigate. After all, it is not Xiao Longqiu. Chen Pingan just bends his fingers and taps gently on the stair railing, not knowing what kind of xianjia wood it is made of. There is a clanging sound of gold and stone. The intercontinental ferry in Pima Zone on the Skeleton Beach has always been the source of wealth for Luopa Mountain. Almost half of the ferry has the surname Qin. The reason why he was not assigned to go to the sea to walk the darts was because the Middle-earth sect had already taken the initiative to hand over a ferry to the Confucian temple to take care of it. So after returning to the world, Chen Pingan didn't think much about it, but the last time he was in Gonglan, when the husband drank and was happy, he accidentally missed his mouth. If Pima Zong is only used as the next sect, it is barely possible to leave a cross-continental ferry, but as one of the Luzhou sect of Beiju, Haoranjiuzhou, each continent has a share, and Beiju Luzhou is actually in the Confucian temple. At the same time, there was just one missing, so Pima Zong became like he should surrender the ferry. As a result, Mao Xiaodong, who was promoted to the division of the Academy of Rites, somehow suggested that Chonglin, who had already surrendered 2 intercontinental ferry boats. Zong, just take out one more. Anyway, if you have a lot of money, even if you give it to the Confucian temple, you won't have one left. It was a small-scale internal discussion in the Confucian temple. There were only the 3 leaders of the Confucian temple, the chief and deputy head of the Confucian temple, the worship of wine and the business of the 3 university palace, and a small group of sages to accompany the saints. In addition, all the college leaders failed to attend. Mao Xiaodong, a tall scholar of the palace, said such a speech, causing the audience to fall silent. Liji Shuigong Jojo had to bite the bullet and seconded his own Mao Sai, and then there was no objection to it, and the agenda was approved by default. At that time, the old scholar had not restored the Confucian temple shrine, so naturally he was not present. What's the relationship between Li Xing's line of learning from Gong Sai's righteousness and my Wenxing line? Jian Xiu has the custom of asking the sword, so the old scholars asking the wine is also a must. At the top of the stairs, the old general smiled and said, I wanted to give you an accident. One of Yao Xian had one arm, holding the fox fur. His grandfather was very awkward, and said that if he was frozen during these steps, he would have a fart. Grandpa's careful thinking is actually not accepting the old. Yao Fuyin just didn't know. Yao Jinji laughed and said, this is called a strong midfielder. In the past, an empty sleeve was hanging down on his side, but now Mr. Fuyin simply tied the sleeve, as if telling others openly that I was missing an arm. You can just laugh if you want to make a joke. It turned out that the old general deliberately slowed the schedule by 2 days. Obviously, Chen Pingan waited for Fei Jin from Yao Mansion to pass the letter. He immediately left the customs and rushed to Mirage City, intending to personally the ferry to Xiande Mountain. Otherwise, you won't encounter this deer-headed chief fairy halfway. Chen Pingan walked quickly upstairs. The old general reached out and grabbed his arm and smiled. Go, a few drinks? Chen Pingan nodded. I'm done, don't drink too much. Lu Zong didn't keep up. Who didn't know? In the eyes of the old general, Chen Pingan was half of Yao's grandson, or half of his grandson-in-law. There is a big brazier in the house, and Yao Xianji is responsible for warming up the wine. Chen Pingan bent over and sat on a bench, picked up the tongs, fiddled with the charcoal fire lightly, and asked, Yao Lingzi's Minghuan knife still can't be found. About Umo knows the temperament of the old general, and the ferry boat deliberately made the decoration of this room as simple and plain as possible. As Lord Fu Yin, who was in charge of this matter, he curled his lips and said, It's difficult, there are no clues, but I dug up a lot of unseen things. The old man smiled and said, Finally, it's a bit like a Fu Yin. Throwing a knife is nothing. Yao Xianji bored and said, Grandpa, this is because you can't stand and talk. It's so light. The Fu Yin office has mobilized so much manpower, but there is no result. Anyway, I feel bad in my heart. I'm not standing, I'm sitting and talking. The old man said, Furthermore, the boss is not too young, he is still a bachelor, and his waist is not good. No wonder he drank with people in his early years and didn't dare to go to the school. Yao Xianji habitually stretched out his hand to warm himself, and immediately blushed when he heard the words. He raised his head and complained, Grandpa, can you stop talking about this with Mr. Qin? Chen Pingan suddenly said, I just noticed that there is a woman on the ferry, who is not young, but not low. She was standing on the second floor of the ferry before. She looked at Xianji in her eyes. Ah, there is that kind of sign, can't be wrong. The old man raised his eyebrows and became interested. Oh. Is there such a thing? The Daquan monks who were able to work on this ferry boat must have been to the battlefield back then. Yao Xianji said helplessly, Mr. Qin, don't talk nonsense if there is nothing. I know which woman Mr. Qin is talking about. After all the monks in the army in the capital will personally review their files, background, mountain pedigree, battlefield resume. Yao Xianji, the man in the house, is very clear. That girl is Lu Yi, her boudoir name Yuanyang, the Taoist name is Yifu. She is a native of Daquan. She was born in a family of local prefectures. She was born in the roots of an earth fairy at a young age, and she practiced in the mountains early in the morning. In his early years in the battlefields of Jiangyi and Mirage City, Lu Yi used the Dragon Gate realm to cultivate his skills, relying on his own Taoism and 2 masters to pass on his treasures, and his battle achievements were not lost to a few golden elixir and earth immortals. Of course, Lu Yi is a very brilliant woman. Yao Xianji occasionally walks on the ferry, but she doesn't squint at herself. That's right, like what a who lacks an arm does. Besides, Yao Xianji really didn't think much about her. Chen Pingan said in a huff, What do I do with this kind of joke? The old man pointed to Yao Xianji and smiled, Is this count as blindness? Tell me, what use do you want? Chen Pingan began to add fuel and jealousy, and he smiled and said, Some people are bachelor, it's impossible, but some people are bachelor based on their true ability. The old general and Yao Xianji asked about the general situation of Lu Yi, and learned that this female fairy teacher was born in Daquan, a scholarly family. Okay, the name Yifu is very good. It makes people happy and courageous when they hear it. Several times aside from the protection of the elders of the division, he was in a dangerous situation, and he was able to kill the demon and perform meritorious services. In the end, he held the Mirage City. When His Majesty was rewarded for his merits, Lu Yi only asked the court for a third-class worship status. Not so good, no matter how your Majesty should give a second-class worship. As for Lu Yi, who is now in his 60s, what can be a problem? The age of Jiazi of a woman on the mountain, resting at the foot of the mountain, is not equivalent to the age of cardamom for a woman on the mountain. The old man rubbed his chin and sighed. I don't think the fairy is worthy of that girl. Chen Pingan said, I think too. Yao Xianji smiled bitterly. The old man laughed heartily, raised his hand, and Chen Pingan gave him a light high five, which was very tacit understanding. Taking the bowl of rice wine from Yao Xian's hand, Chen Pingan glanced at the old fox fur hanging on the hanger. Knowing the origin of this thing, it was a gift given to the Yao family in the border gate by the first Emperor Lu Jin of Dequan in his early years. Yao Xianji may not think much about it, but if the Dequan dynasty sees it today, it is estimated that she will feel uncomfortable in her heart. It's just that every family has scriptures that are difficult to recite, and Chen Pingan can only pretend that he doesn't know the subtle twists and turns of the human heart here. Chen Pingan remembered something, and took out 2 red envelopes from his sleeves, each with a small summer coin inside. Chen Pingan made a special trip to select 2 inscriptions that are auspicious words for blessing the younger generation. He handed the red envelope to Yao Xianji and said with a smile, I will help Yao Lingji and give it to her child, as I, Uncle Chen, will make up for the New Year's Eve money owed over the years. Yao Lingji, married as a wife a long time ago, now has a pair of children, but the 2 children are not very old now. Similar to Chen Pingan, many monks on the mountain like to collect all kinds of small summer money with many inscriptions, similar to spending money, open furnaces in the treasury, hang lanterns in the spring, celebrate birthdays, and have a variety of inscriptions. Chen Pingan has been traveling for so many years, but he hasn't left. Privately, he has collected 6 sets of the Chinese zodiac, little summer flower money, 3 sets of monthly order flower god money, and a set of engraved Kun Yushan models. 36 Tiangang Xia Shuqian. For this reason, Chen Pingan spent a lot of private money. He took the Gu Yuqin in his hand and gave it to the Luopashan accountant Wei Wenlong to take care of it. Get started. In this matter, the AI Aizhou Lu Kaishan is a master-level figure, and has collected many orphans who are known as unparalleled in the world. Yao Xianji put away the red envelope and said with a smile, the 2 kids were probably crazy when they received this New Year's money. My uncle, there is no majesty on their side. The 2 children were weird and smart when they were young. They were pitiful and wild. They only wanted to ask me about Mr. Chen's landscape stories. When I was uncle, I was a little sincere. No, during the first month this time, the 2 children and their uncle had to kowtow a few more times before they could give the red envelopes. Yao Zhen asked casually, Wu Tan is not in Tongyi's Hao, he went to Haoran World, we only have Pushan Huangyun as the master of ending, have you both seen him? Chen Pingan nodded and said, I have seen it before, the first time I met at Yunku Fudi, and then something happened. Lord Yishan agreed to Zion Dushan as the honorable guest. Yao Xianji wondered, last time I was in Mirage City, why didn't you tell me? Master Fu Yin was delighted in his heart, hey, under Mr. Chen's next clan, wouldn't he have to be on par with Pushan Huangyun? Chen Pingan said in a huff, what do you say about this? Old General Yao tweeted, that's a great beauty, the Washinshan Rouge list of Yunku Fudi, that is, Sovereign Jiang dare not include her in it, otherwise it will be ranked in the top 3, and you will not be able to escape. Look. It didn't come in vain this time. The old man took a sip of his wine and said with a smile, can you hold it? Chen Pingan was speechless. Yao Xianji finally found the opportunity, and joked, instead of me, facing such a beautiful mountain fairy master, and still a female martial artist, she must be unable to restrain herself and sleep at night. Chen Pingan smiled and said, can't sleep at night. Toss and turn, be careful to hurt your waist, then it will be worse. Xianji, you can, but a good person, because you don't want to harm the girl, afraid of marrying the door and keeping the widow. Yao Xianji almost suffered from internal injuries and had to drink a sip of warm rice wine. The old man smiled and asked, "Since you are all great masters, can you discuss each other?" Chen Pingan nodded, "I won." The old man asked again, "What if you meet Wu Tan?" Chen Pingan thought for a while, nodded and said, "I can win. It's just that it won't be easy to win. After all, Wu Tan is a martial artist who has been fighting for many years at the Guasian level. In addition to removing all the talisman prohibitions on his hands and feet, Chen Pingan also has a mentality of winning and losing, and completely let go ask the punch with your hands and feet. Now Chen Pingan and Ren Wenquen can roughly distinguish four situations. Suppressing the realm, not suppressing the realm, whether there is a talisman forbidden on the body, and the last kind of revealing the real body, the posture of the city head. Lu Zong knocked on the door lightly, pushed the door and walked in, rubbing his hands and smiling. "What can win if you win?" Yao Xianji poured another bowl of wine to Lu Zong, and said, "We are talking about Huang Yiyun and Wu Xing, Wu Tan." Lu Zong shook the wine bowl, smelled the wine, turned his head and looked at the swordman in Qingshan who was no longer drinking, reaching out to the fire, glanced at the stacked narrow knives on his waist and asked, "Your big disciple, when?" To the end. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "It is all ready." Lu Zong drank his bowl of wine in one gulp, his whole old face wrinkled with anxiety. He hesitated for a moment, and whispered, "Actually, I always wanted to find a chance to have a fight with Huang Yiyun. It's a pity that I was in Taoyi last time. When meeting Du, she was going to discuss business with our Majesty as Pushan Mountain Master. Am not good to speak. Now, why bother to stay close, right?" Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Just wait for Brother Liu's words." Lu Zong said with a bitter face, "I am in the golden body state, unable to travel far and wide. It is not appropriate to ask a boxing on the boat. I will talk about it when I get to Xiandu Mountain." Chen Pingan said, "Don't be so troublesome." In an instant, the world changed, only one brazier remained the same, and the four people still sat around the furnace, but other than that, there was nothing left in the world. The four people and the brazier are all imaginary and too imaginary, as if they are hovering in an endless ancient mystery. Yao Xianji gently stomped his feet, ripples under his feet, as if stepping on a calm lake. Chen Pingan stood up, moved horizontally, and stood in the void 100 feet away from the brazier. After holding one hand, he handed the palm to the other, smiling and inviting, "Wu Fu Lu Zong, just punch out." Lu Zong sat on the spot, his scalp numb, like sitting on pins and needles. It's strange to say that this kid, Chen Pingan, in a snow-white robe, with a sword on his back, strayed into the blessed land. He did away with the invincible old man Ding Ying. After leaving the lotus root, what feats he has done for so many years. In fact, Lu Xinzong became the chief worshipper of the Yao family of Daquan. He has probably heard about it, even if it was the last reunion in Mirage City. At that time Chen Pingan was already a last-generation hermit, or a well-deserved sword in the upper 5 realms. I was immortal, but Lu Zong didn't feel any pressure to get along with and stand with him. But at this moment, Lu Zong instinctively had an idea that he should not ask him about punches, but drink, chat, and fight. Yao Xianji held back his laugh, and was about to make a joke about this Lu worship, but he saw his grandfather gently shaking his head and beckoning him not to speak. Lu Zong took a deep breath, smiled suddenly, got up slowly, and swept forward towards Chen Pingan. After standing still, he took out a horn knife from his sleeve that he hadn't used for many years. It's not a good sword, it's still sharp against the enemy in the blessed land of the hometown, but it's not enough to see in this awe-inspiring world. Even the rank of magic treasures is not enough. It's just that this questioning fist is mostly unable to keep this old man who has depended on each other all his life. Looking down at the horn knife, the old man will inevitably feel distressed and sad. Lu Zong said frankly, in this questioning fist, the realm of our two is very different, so I will have a murderous intent, and I will not be murderous in the slightest. You can bear it more. Chen Pingan nodded, and then slid two short knives from the two cyan sleeves, as narrow as a dagger, and threw one of them to Lu Zong. Use my short knife. It's easier to get out of the knife if it's blocked. Lu Zong breathed a sigh of relief. After putting away the horn knife, he shook the dagger-like short knife into a beautiful knife, and then lifted it up. The inscription, Chao Lu, Lu Zong asked with a smile, did you talk about it? Chen Pingan introduced, the real name Zhulu is the Chao Zi dagger recorded in official history. The short knife in Chen Pingan's hand, with the inscription Muxia, is the same as that of Chao Zi's dagger. The inscriptions are blindfolds. For so many years, Chen Pingan has not found a clue to this knife. Since it can be comparable to Chao Zi's dagger, it must be the origin is good, plus it was obtained from the assassin who cut the deer mountain, so Chen Pingan took the opportunity to name it Cut the Deer. Lu Zong's eyes were appreciative, and he nodded and said, a good knife, a good name, even more so for the current knife holder. Lu Zong's figure disappeared in a flash, only between the place and the blue shirt, dragging out a light streamer with a spatula. Chen Pingan remained motionless, raised one arm, twisted the tip of the chasing knife with two fingers, patted it with a palm, and fell heavily on Lu Zong's face, knocking Lu Zong to the ground on the spot, and a dagger was thrown away. Chen Pingan kicked Lu Zong's head again, and instantly slid out dozens of feet. Chen Pingan still stood on the spot, just tossing the dagger gently back to Lu Zong. Lu Zong jumped up, stretched out his hand to catch the dagger, wiped the face with the back of his hand, then tilted his head and spit out a large mouthful of bruises, and said with an angry smile, "Good boy, don't you feel pressured?" Chen Pingan asked, "Is there any difference between the pressure of the environment and not the pressure of the environment? Doesn't it still require me to stop and then stop, in order to prevent you from being killed by accident?" Yao Xianji, who was watching the battle from a distance, widened his eyes. Hearing Mr. Chen's words, he suddenly felt a little strange, as if he had never really known Mr. Chen. The old general drank his wine and smiled and said, "How do you think he got here over the years? The same rice feeds hundreds of people, and 100 families of rice feeds one person. It is not easy to seek a life in the world, and the hardships here are not enough for outsiders. Maybe the only words, all the truths, sword repair is only in the sword, and wufu is only in the fist." On the side of the martial arts field, Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "It's just that the golden body state is good enough, and it's barely a paper physique, so I think it can be regarded as a half-distance travel state. By coincidence, on my side, I really can't. That's it. It's okay to ask me to suppress the realm. I'll suppress the 3 realms and teach the opponent sword skills in the same realm. The second option is to follow me if I don't overwhelm the environment. Stand still, can you let me move as you go? I lose even if I move half a step. Luopa Mountain Bamboo House is a line. It has always been this way to teach fist to fist. I can't bear it, I can't hold it, and I go back to drink." The two sides are still Brother Lu and Brother Chin. Lu Zong didn't have any words, so of course he chose the second one. Within a stick of incense, Chen Pingan remained motionless from beginning to end. If the dagger was close, he would gently push the blade away, but Lu Zong's fists and feet were required to get closer. Chen Pingan would either stand still and be beaten, his expression was indifferent. The golden body bottleneck wufu shot with all his strength and landed on Qingshan, looking extremely painless or itchy, or just slapped it down, hitting Lu Zong to vomit blood. In a weird questioning punch in a weird world, Lu Zong is like a mortal man shaking the mountain. He does not know what he can do. In the end, he will only hurt his punch. The heavier the punch, the heavier the injury. Staggered to his feet, shaking his figure, Lu Zong clenched the dagger in his hand, his head drooping, and his face dripping to the ground. Lu Zong suddenly raised his head. He had already changed a few mouthfuls of pure innocent old martial artist. He had already blurred his vision. He could only vaguely see the man in the blue shirt not far away. He turned back and pulled away a simple and honest man without warning. Fist frame, it seems to take the initiative to hand fists to himself. It doesn't seem to be, that's it. The other party is finally about to pass a fist. Only when he was able to stand up, Lu Zong had exhausted all of Lu Zong's strength. It was just such a simple action, but it was tantamount to a fight between Lu Zong and the masters of the same generation when he was at the peak of his spirit in his hometown. Fight for life. The old man's figure is floating around, only the arm holding the knife is still tight, closed his eyes, trying to force a breath of pure innocence, to no avail, can't be done, the world is full of fists, let the old man there is a sense of insignificance that day may fly, Sumra mustard, how small I am. And I only felt that after the opponent handed this punch, he would definitely fall, just a moment, even this bit of distraction, which was as fast as a white horse, was drowned by the tide of fists that enveloped the world. Between life and death. Lu Zong suddenly raised his head, his face gritted his teeth, his arms trembled, and with the help of a stature shaking, he turned around in place, and handed a knife indiscriminately at the green shirt. The figure is slow, the shot is soft, and a Chao Zi dagger in his hand can't even afford the slightest brilliance. But for this knife, Lao Tzu is Lu Zong, who is the first person to use the sword technique of the lotus root, and must be handed out. After a while, or maybe a long time later, Lu Zong, who was confused, was slightly awake. The old man suddenly noticed that he had a hand on his shoulder, and he heard the man laugh softly, good punch. Xiao Longqiu, the dragon-beard immortal from the last sect has returned to Middle-earth. At the same time, the mountain lord Lin Huizhi and the ruler Qingqiu have also disappeared. Fortunately, the young female crown on the side of Zushan Rui's pointed hut has also left Xiaolongqiu with Yujin. She just asked Linghu Bananayu to help guard the hut. Now that he has arrived at Xiande Mountain, the fairy of Taishishan who is guarding the road across the continent for his two children is indeed a rare visit to Tongyi's house, so he left Mishua Peak and went out alone to explore the mountains and rivers. Jing Yuqian and Tan Yingzhou go to Luobaotan every day to listen to Mr. Xiaomo's teaching of Taoism and help make wine together. A mansion in Misiafeng, Huang Yiyun, whose injuries were almost healed, went out to enjoy the snow today. She walked all the way, and near a pavilion, she saw Chiu Du and the girl Hu Chuling making a snowman over there. Yi Yunyun learned from the old woman that the disciple Xue Huai and Pei Qian were at the flower sweeping table, and they had another discussion, which seemed to have benefited a lot. In Dali, capital city of Aquarius Island, a scholar took the book boy Chui Ci to visit the Temple of Fire, and found the Ant Feng under the flower shed. Ant Feng saw the Confucian scholar from the Lizhu cave and said with a smile, walking against the wind, Lingrenchen also. Li Shixing made a salute, and Ant Feng's figure instantly disappeared from the side of the flower shed and the stone, standing beside the stone table without the gift. After Li Shixing got up, Ant Feng took out 2 pots of wine, and continued, although this is not a good thing, there are still people who are waiting. The book boy Chui Ci didn't know the identity of the woman in front of him, let alone what she was selling. The young man only knew her 2 sentences, which were first written by Yujing's 3rd head teacher Lu Qin. Li Shixing smiled and said, "What does the road say? There are yellow leaves in one place." In the territory of the Xinyunxiu dynasty in the southern part of Aquarius Island, there is a high peak of a lofty mountain. 2 people stopped here to look around. A young man in sackcloth sandals, a strong figure and a dull look, was followed by an extremely handsome young man, wearing a purple jade crown and a white jade belt on his waist. The teenager was Wu Tijing, the sword repairman who left Jingyang Mountain. He glanced at the man who crouched down and chewed on a piece of licorice and said, "Hu Feng, I think this place is good." Within a few hundred li, the aura is actually thin, but it is a bit better than the land with beautiful mountains and clear waters, in the eyes of ordinary folks. Nowadays, Aquarius Island is full of mountain forces that are busy fighting for territory. Cut off a piece here and delineate a piece there. Otherwise, the dynasty and vassal who have successfully restored the country will dispatch the Kintiangian Earthmaster to help the people in their own country. The fairy mansion on the mountain is looking for a new site, and there are several hilltops where the two have been photographed before, even if there are people. Rarely, there are still monks, and they are the first to board. It was not easy for them to find such a hill that they could barely make do. The man named Hu Feng chewed the licorice and nodded, "I'll choose here." Because the two planned to establish a faction in the mountains, in fact, there are only two people, Hu Feng and Wu Tijing. But neither side thinks this is a big deal. The two of them traveled long distances, and then met together, but they soon became friends, and there was no reason to say. In fact, the two sides have completely different temperaments. One is big-hearted and can be described as self-confident and conceited. Anyway, Wu Tijing should be born as a swordsman in the upper 5 realms, sooner or later. One is broad-minded, Hu Feng has a gentle temperament, and usually speaks slowly. The only similarity is probably that both sides are sword repairers. Wu Tijing's eyebrows are flying, confident, as if he has the kind of confidence in the mother's womb. He smiled and said, "Hu Feng, our school, you come to be the head, and by the way the money, I will only be the ruler. Patriarch is good, anyway, you will definitely become the sect of Kendo at the head of the sect. By then, you will be the sect master." Well, it's almost the same as that of Luopashan Chen Pingon. A man in his early 40s, a sword repairman in the Longmen realm. One is less than 20 years old, sword repair in the Golden Core realm. Adding up the ages, there is no one, but they have to start to create a sect and think about the future sect. If you only talk about fairy money, in fact, if you add them together, you don't even have a grain of money. Master. Our school, it is estimated that for a long period of time, there will be only 2 of us. Who else can you control besides me? Hu Feng said slowly, "It's incomparable with him. Besides, there is nothing comparable. Each walks its own way, each has its own way of living." Wu Tijing said, "Hu Feng, your habit of vain and self-defeating, change it in the future and learn more from me." Hu Feng said, "Your arrogant self-esteem is also a stinking problem. If you don't converge a little bit, you will suffer a lot in the future." Wu Tijing, a young man who would really give people a feeling of madness, laughed out loud. That's why he fell in love with Hu Feng. It's not like in Jingyang Mountain. Every time I go out, I don't have flattering sights, just some old sword repairs, and say some words of approval with a pleased face. Anyway, I am self-satisfied, so I don't understand it. How does Wu Tijing practice swords? Does it have anything to do with you? Wu Tijing hesitated, squatted down, and asked, "You and that guy are from the same hometown, and you are the same age, so are you familiar with them?" Hu Feng turned his head and glanced at Wu Tijing, smiled, as if saying something. It is really rare that Wu Tijing would be so interested in someone. Wu Tijing twitched, "I am arrogant, but I am not a fool. I can't beat not only Chen Ping'an, but also Lu Xianyang." Hu Feng did not rush to help him add 3 words, temporary. Wu Tijing smiled and said, "Otherwise." Hu Feng's ancestral home is on Erlang Lane, not far from the ancestral home of Yuan's family in the Shangzhou Kingdom of Daily. When I was young, I followed my grandfather and walked the streets and alleys together, repairing bowls, sharpening knives and the like. Grandpa knows the old customs well in his hometown. He often helps with happy events. He can also earn some money to supplement the family. In addition, his grandpa opened a shop selling Spring Festival couplets, window papers, and other odds and ends. Hu Feng actually lived when he was a child. It's not too poor. It's just that his grandfather's surname is Chai, but his surname is Hu. Neighbors in the neighborhood say his grandfather is a patriarch, so Hu Feng got a lot of blindfolds when he was young. Hu Feng knew it for the first time when it was necessary to seal the gravehead inscription. The shop's business is deserted. It's only a few minutes during the new year. Usually it's not always open every day. There is only a sissy kiln worker who frequents the business, and occasionally there will be a black and thin little girl who will drag oil bottles. Staying next to the man who likes to turn orchid fingers, did not speak. Hu Feng's only impression of her was that his eyes were very big and her face was very small. Being a sissy man of an uncle, he likes to call her Rouge. In fact, this kiln worker doesn't have a lot of money in his pocket. It's only his grandfather who doesn't dislike him for being a man, and is willing to chat with him a few more words. Even if the sissy doesn't buy things, she doesn't drive people. The little girl would sit on the threshold, and she was so hungry that she called her uncle and went home together. Grandpa left when Hu Feng was a teenager. Hu Feng didn't sell his ancestral house. At that time, it seemed to change the sky, and everything became different. Like the people in the small town, Hu Feng hunted for treasures, turned boxes and cabinets, bottles and cans at home, but everything that looked like an old thing must be taken out to see if he could sell it. Hu Feng was from Longshu River at the time. Inside, I picked up a bunch of beautiful stones. There were people asking prices on Fulu Street and Taoya Alley. Hu Feng didn't think much about it. He divided the 8 things commonly called snakestones into half, and neither side was offended. For 2 pennies, during that period of time, I couldn't sleep well every day, and I didn't dare to go out of the house for fear of being thief. Before that, Hu Feng had seen a fellow of the same age in Ni Ping Alley called Song Jisin. The old people said he was the illegitimate son of Master Song, the supervising officer. If it was not easy to bring him back to the yamen, he asked someone to place Song Jisin. In that alley, this Song Jisin seemed to never be short of money in his pocket. He took a maid every day, wandering around and wandering around. It was quite show-stopping. Hu Feng liked to go to Laosishan when he was a child. He often saw a guy named Dong Shuijing. Feng discovered that Dong Shuijing likes to choose those broken tiles with words. Dong Shuijing took the initiative to find him later. Both of them were relatively taciturn children, who tacitly made business and bartered things. In Huang Erniang's wine shop, Hu Feng often saw the janitor named Xing Dafeng. The man's eyes seemed to grow on the woman's body. In the water-grabbing season, Hu Feng always saw a skinny person of the same age, who seemed to be in the same alley with Song Jisin, and the two were still neighbors, but one was particularly rich and the other was particularly poor. Grandpa didn't allow him to approach the orphan surnamed Chin, but he was not like the old man near Xinghua Lane, who spoke so badly. What a sorrowful star, a scumbag. Grandpa just knows many ways, he just keeps him away from that person, and never tells the reason. There was a time when Hu Feng was fishing alone on the Bluestone Cliff. It was pitted. It was passed on from the hometown. The local dialect was said to be the sun's nest. It was similar to the crab archway. I didn't know who said it first. Of it. Hu Feng saw with his own eyes that there was a child who hadn't learned to tease water, but he was playful. First he shoveled a dog in a shallow place in the Longshu River. Then somehow, he almost drowned, but Hu Feng just lost it. Fishing rod, if you want to run to save people, there is that thin bamboo rod-like guy who saw it with sharp eyes, dashed all the way, jumped into the water, dragged the child to the shore. The child howled and cried, far away. Hu Feng, I don't know what was said, anyway, that guy finally stopped the child from crying, as if he even gave the child a straw grasshopper. When some older children nearby approached, the orphan surnamed Chin left. It turned out that after I heard that the elders of the family burned down their children's clothes that day, maybe it was unlucky. In the past, the old and young, men and women near the Taijuojing, all liked to enjoy the shade under the old locust tree. They were short in their heads and could not hide anything anyway. The old people tell stories, the women chew their tongues finely, the men watch the ladies, and the children play in groups around the old locust tree. Since there are wedding shops, of course there will be funeral shops. There are not many such shops in the town. There are only a few shops, but the business between the two is much worse. Hu Feng once asked his grandfather why. Grandpa said that the dead are the biggest ones. No matter how poor they are, they will tighten their belts and take out some money. Even if you borrow money from someone, you should try your best to do it well. But why don't you make any money for weddings? Grandpa didn't say why. Grandpa treats him very well. Almost give whatever you have at home, but there are also a few rules. Since Hu Feng remembers a little, Grandpa will ask him again, such as don't pick up the money on the road. When you encounter something, don't ask if you can. But if you have to ask for help, you must pay it back. No matter whether it is paying back the money or the favor, you can't owe it. If you can't learn the New Year's Eve, you can spare it, deliberately, surplus, to the coming year. But there is a kind of happy money, Hu Feng can ask for it, and he must go, just whose family gets married, and the bride gets married, someone will block the way, Hu Feng will follow, receive a red envelope, and then in his heart, silently said a few old sayings that Grandpa gave him. In addition, although I opened a wedding shop, if there is a funeral in the town, I can help. After the work is done, I will go home after eating at the family's house. If the family needs someone to help guard the spirit, then accept it. Just remember to enter the morning hall, don't give up halfway, even if you're sleepy, you should just take a nap there. Don't be afraid to go home in the middle of the night. Get back to sleep. In that fairy grave, one day each year, Grandpa would take Hu Feng to kowtow. Before my grandfather left, he even confessed to himself, even if his grandfather is gone, this matter should not be forgotten. Even if he grows up in the future and needs to travel far, he still needs 3 sticks of incense on this day of the year. At the far west of the town, there is a wicker-like girl named Li, but she is not weak enough to carry 2 buckets full of water on a pole. She has a younger brother who has a stupid head. Once the child wore open-crotch pants in the alley near home and walked wildly. The child twisted his fingers on a cicada that he didn't know where he had picked it from or was plucked from a tree. Lifting it was golden, under the sun, it was shining, and it looked different, and it was much bigger than the common jihua in small towns, so Hu Feng looked at it a few more times. Yomo felt that the show was successful, and the child wearing open-crotch pants deliberately slowed down, shaking his head and shaking his head, while twisting his wrist, shook the cicada vigorously. Hu Feng was sitting on a bench in the doorway of a family in the alley, helping to sharpen a kitchen knife. Grinding a kitchen knife can earn 3 to 5 coins, and he can bargain anyway. The woman in the distance stood at the door of her house, her hands on hips, opened her voice, shouting loudly, calling her son to go home for dinner. Hu Feng casually asked the child named Huizi if he could buy the zilihu shell with 3 cents. It's okay for Hu Feng not to speak. When he opened his mouth, the child became a little scared. He immediately moved to the root of the wall and trot all the way against the wall. Hu Feng didn't take it seriously, and he was a little grateful that the kid didn't take it seriously, otherwise the 3 pennies and what the picture was, so he focused his attention and continued to lower his head and sharpen the knife. Never thought that the child would tiptoe back, put the golden cicada on the bench, and ran away. When Hu Feng wanted to stop him, the child ran away and lifted his pants at the same time. After a turn, he ran out of sight. Hu Feng couldn't laugh or cry. After a moment, by the corner wall, he stuck his head out and hid far away before he dared to grin at Hu Feng. Hu Feng took out the copper coin, and the child shook his head vigorously. At that time, Hu Feng didn't know what this roadside encounter really meant and how much impact it would have on his future life. I used to think that year after year, carrying the ancestral wooden box, full of guys, walking around the streets, carrying whetstones, or helping people to repair pots and pots. In addition, the two grindstones in the family were the legendary dragon-cutting stones by accident at a fairy family ferry crossing after Hu Feng left his hometown. Through a book dedicated to the great treasures on the mountain, he learned that they were actually the legendary dragon-cutting stones. I gave Wu Tijing a piece, and it was a slightly larger piece. Hu Feng didn't have any friends in the small town. Since he was away from home, he sincerely became friends with Wu Tijing, and the other party's sword training aptitude was much better than himself, so there was no need to be stingy. Wu Tijing asked curiously, "What do you want?" "I want to be so absorbed." Hu Feng smiled and said, "Think about things from my childhood." He didn't know how to repay the man named Li Huai. Because that golden cicada shed, it was a cave sky filled with sword aura. Wu Tijing said, "Your hometown is really speechless." Hu Feng said, "In fact, it's okay. Knowing everything is the same as knowing nothing." Hu Feng took out a bamboo flute and played it gently. In the moonlight, the flute sounded long and full of mountains and plains. A Luxianzi is about to arrive at the Xiandushan ferry. The chief consecrated Lu Zong's face was pale, but he was very energetic. He was walking unsteadily, just like drinking. Therefore, after the group of people disembarked, Lu Zong did not follow to disembark, because the Luxianzi was about to set off to return to Daquan Mirage City. Chen Pingan took Yao Old General and Yao Xianji to the Qingping Peak together. After the ferry lifted off again, Lu Zong left the bow and went to a room on the first floor of the ferry, knocked gently on the door, and shouted, "Your Majesty." After crossing the threshold, the Empress Daquan was already sitting at the table and reading the memorial. A maid in the room was standing on tiptoe, moving gently, closing the window. While climbing, Chen Pingan chatted with the old general all the way. I talked about some landscapes and stories of old people. Chen Pingan missed his hometown and Luopa Mountain a little. Probably becoming the most fascinating person in my mind is a sermon. Naturally, Chen Pingan thought of the old cook who worked hard. Perhaps in Zhu Lian's heart, it was like living with a child who would never grow up called Jianghu. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.